Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is 5:31 p.m. in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. This meeting is officially open with a quorum present. We will now move to our pledges, which will be read by Barbara Griffith.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We will now move to recognitions with Ms. Griffith.
Okay. President Jackson, October is National Principal Month, and an opportunity for all of us to celebrate and honor our principals here in the Fort Worth ISD. You'll be seeing photographs of just a few of our principals on the screen right now. Chief Academic Officer Chief of Schools Jerry Moore is going to share some thoughts on this subject.
Thank you very much. Along with our teachers, the principal is the most impactful person a school campus has, perhaps the most important figure in the entire educational experience of our students. As the principal goes, so goes the campus. They set the tone, they take care of students, teachers, families. They really keep their eye on the whole school community. Over the last 2 years, principals in Fort Worth ISD have faced several challenging situations. They have worked first and foremost to protect the health and well-being of everyone in our school orbit, in order for successful instruction to continue to take place. Even with the complications of the COVID pandemic, our principals have been there day in and day out for students and teachers, and have kept our families involved in the educational experience. Fort Worth ISD principals, all 127 of them, represent a wide range of experience. However, tonight, we would like to identify some of our campus leaders who have served our school community educating students for 30-plus years, with a vast majority of that being right here in Fort Worth ISD. They include James Garcia, Diamond Hill Jarvis High School principal, 24 years of service in Fort Worth ISD. Omar Ramos, Trimble Tech High School principal, 26 years. Saritha Lofton, the Leadership Academy at Forest Oak Middle School principal, 30 years with Fort Worth ISD. Barbara Ozuna, principal at W.P. McLean Middle School, 31 years. Ingrid Williams, Success High School principal, 33 years with the district. Antonio Martinez, Northside High School principal, 38 years of service with Fort Worth ISD. And Connie Smith, Overton Park Elementary School principal, 44 years here in Fort Worth ISD. Connie's here in the front row. Jim Garcia is here as well. Mr. Garcia. Mr. Martinez. From the school's first-year school principals to campus leaders that have been long-serving here in Fort Worth ISD, all of our principals deserve our praise and our recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we recognize and honor all of the principals here in Fort Worth ISD. Thank you so much.
We are going to be naming the Tanglewood Elementary Auditorium the Alex William Jr. Auditorium. So I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Williams, as written, as submitted by our friends at Tanglewood. Mr. Alex Williams Jr. served the Tanglewood school community for 27 years as our campus safety and security officer. But Mr. Williams did much more than keep us safe. Mr. Williams kept us whole. He was everyone's best friend. He took time to learn about our families, our interests, and our needs. There was nothing about Mr. Williams that wasn't real. His smile hid the physical pain he was often in, and his laugh brought us joy each day. Mr. Williams knew everyone by name. He knew which students belonged to which parents, who their siblings were, which teams they rooted for, and how they got home at the end of the day. He would see their cars coming and call for them in the carpool line before the placard in the front windshield was even visible. He truly cared for all of us. Mr. Williams has an enormous fan club. On any given Friday, you will see folks all over Fort Worth proudly wearing his signature statement T-shirt. Friday, 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 good old Friday. Mr. Williams was proud to be a Tanglewood Tiger. He loved our school programs and performances. He would always open and close the programs for us. Mr. Williams commanded a presence. As soon as he stepped on stage, the crowd would grow silent. Everyone wanted to hear what this man had to say. He was often invited by the teachers to participate alongside the students in the play. He loved to ham it up with the kids and make the audience laugh. For this reason, we wish to dedicate the school auditorium to him and officially rename it the Alex Williams Jr. Auditorium. A plaque will be made to honor his life and service to the Tanglewood school community. It will be proudly placed at the entrance to the auditorium in our front foyer. We are grateful for this opportunity to keep Mr. Williams' legacy alive. And President Jackson, there is a large delegation of Mr. Williams' family and friends led by his mother, Mrs. Easter Williams, who is asked to be allowed to say a few words now.
Good evening. My name is Easter Williams, a Fort Worth ISD retiree and mom to Alex Williams Jr. Speaking on behalf of the Williams family, friends, and former co-workers, we thank you for all that you have done, all that you are doing, and all that you will do for our loved one. Alex wore many hats, and I believe that he wore them well. Please continue to remember him in your thoughts and prayers. Thanks again.
President Jackson also tonight naming the Scarborough Field locker room, the Michael Stewart locker room is underway. And I'd like to read a tribute to Mr. Stewart. Mike Lynn Stewart was installed into the Eastern Hills High School Distinguished Alumnus Hall of Fame in 2019. He grew up in East Fort Worth and was a longtime member of Sagamore Hill Baptist Church. He was a proud member of the EHH class of 1977 and was known for his all-around athleticism, playing for the Highlander sports teams. In adulthood, he worked as a longtime specialist in the healthcare industry, most recently as president of Healthcare Recovery Alliance. He was also a fixture in the stands during most Eastern Hills football and basketball games, dedicating his off hours to identifying needs for the teams and helping enlist them to support them. He also volunteered his time to help coach and mentor young Highlander men to ensure they had opportunities to succeed with or without athletic involvement. In 2015, he founded the EHHS Alumni Support Association to assist the school and student groups in fulfilling unfunded needs. To date, the group of more than 2,800 alums have joined the group and raised over $80,000, along with the manpower to help serve athletics, performing arts, visual arts, and academic endeavors. Mr. Stewart passed away on May 13th, 2021, following a brief illness, and we honor him tonight.
Do any trustees have any comments regarding the individuals that we've honored this evening? Trustee Dar?
Thank you, President Jackson. I personally knew Mr. Williams, as many of the people who are in this room also did, and I know that just the name, just thinking of him brings a smile to my face, and I'm sure it does to yours too. He had positively impacted the lives of my 3 children as well as thousands thousands of other children, educators, parents, and community members. I fondly remember him performing at Tanglewood shows and in their performances, and he was generally wearing a silly wig or donned in a costume of some kind. He was doing a dance, singing a song, but what he was doing was sharing in the delight of performing together and of being a part of that family. Honoring Mr. Williams by naming the auditorium after him is a great way to celebrate a remarkable man and a life very well lived. I know that Mr. Williams is greatly missed by many, but I also know that his goodness, love, and his laughter live on in those who know him and still love him. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Trustee Dar. And I will say on that note that Big Mike Stewart, will be honored at the homecoming of Eastern Hills this weekend. So I would encourage those of you that like to honor him, come on out for that. I want to thank all of our principals for their service each and every day to our students and to the families of the honorees. Thank you for being present this evening. We will move on to public comment. Let me remind you that because of restrictions by the Texas Open Meetings Act, board members may not engage in a verbal exchange about a subject that has not been posted. We will listen and take notes, but the board is prohibited from responding to any inquiries made during a board meeting on any topic not posted on the agenda. However, the board may reply with 1, a statement of specific factual information given in response to the inquiry, 2, recitation of existing policy in response to the inquiry, or 3, direct the person to visit with staff about the issue. While the board listens to concerns of a general nature, speakers should practice normal rules of decorum. Vulgar language and profanity cannot be tolerated, as this is a public meeting and our students are watching. Additionally, disruptions of the meeting will not be tolerated. We ask the audience to refrain from interrupting speakers while they present to the board during this portion of our meeting. Any employee, parent, or other member of the public is asked to comply with the appropriate grievance policy to have a complaint heard pursuant to the applicable board policy. No presentation this evening may exceed 3 minutes unless the speaker has made arrangements for prior approval for additional time because of the use of a translator. Speakers who require the assistance of a translator are permitted double the allotted time of speakers who do not require the assistance of a translator. Furthermore, a speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another speaker. Also this evening, some individuals would like to voice their opinions, but due to the COVID-19 crisis are unable to physically attend. Those written statements were shared with the Board of Trustees prior to this meeting and will not be read aloud during the board meeting. It is essential to gain as much public input as possible, and we understand together we are stronger and build better solutions when we maximize our public input. I ask that you please observe these rules for the purpose of effectively accomplishing the business of the meeting in a timely manner. For those who are speaking, there are sanitation wipes available at the podium. Our first speaker is Carol Guarnieri.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am directing my comments this evening to Toby Jackson. Ms. Jackson, it's been reported that you ask for additional security at these school board meetings because of your fear of violence. Let me reassure you, Ms. Jackson, that there are absolutely not one domestic terrorist in the group that opposes the bond election. Nobody wishes you or any member of the school board ill will. We certainly do object to your using taxpayer dollars to fund these additional officers because of your paranoia. Franklin Roosevelt made the comment that the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. I hope that you will think about this, reflect on it, and maybe adjust some of your opinions about who we are, what we intend to do. Let me again reassure you that The citizens, the taxpayers, the parents, grandparents, we will take back our schools, but we'll do it through the democratic process, which is at the ballot box. Ms. Jackson, I hope that you will rethink the usage of Fort Worth ISD funds to pay additional officers when they're certainly not needed. Again, let me state, there is not one domestic terrorist tonight at this gathering, and none of the people that oppose the bond election are domestic terrorists.
Thank you. Italia De La Cruz.
My name is Italia De La Cruz. I reside at Summer Street Lane. The definition of unity is the state of being united or joined as a whole. What you're trying to teach our children is everything but that. This SEL model is everything but that. Teach history in its full context, but do not indoctrinate and vilify a race. This country is already divided enough. This goes against the Constitution and should be declared an academic fraud. My kids are a minority group. I'm Hispanic. And never once have they come home and said that they feel victimized or discriminated against because of their race or ethnicity. This model is not anti-racism, it is plain racism. School is not a place to push your political opinions onto a younger generation. Do better and focus on what truly matters. Now, as far as this outrageous bond, I vote no. Tarrant County pays some of the highest property taxes in the state, and it is the best we can get from the C rating. Maybe that should be your focus. Furthermore, who is deciding that another 1.7 to 2 with interest billion bond on top of that makes a change to our district when particularly most of that is going to construction costs? You should be very discerning with every decision, proposal, and plan that you make, because we are here and we are not going away. Let's go, Brandon.
Thank you. Christy Cantu Wilson will be followed by Angel Martinez.
Good evening. I'm sure everyone in this room has been getting a barrage of mailings from friends of the Fort Worth ISD to vote yes for the $1.5 billion of spending that they want to add to our debt for the residents and the taxpayers of the city of Fort Worth. When I saw the mailings, I almost wanted to believe them because it said there was not going to be any tax rate increase along with if you vote yes for this. So I went ahead and printed my sample ballot because I wanted to be an informed voter. So I saw on my sample ballot a slight discretion with all the mailings of the largely contractors that are going to be building if we vote this proposition into place, into law, whatever. I saw a big discrepancy because, and I blew it up just because I thought it'd be easier to see that Proposition A out of the $1.5 billion says at the bottom, this is a property tax increase. All the mailings from the Friends of the Fort Worth ISD said, this will not be a property tax rate increase. I like the semantics, how they use that to confuse people. Prop B says for almost 98 plus million, this is a property tax increase. Prop C for 104 million says this is, at the bottom, this is a property tax increase. And Proposition D for 76 million says this is a property tax increase. When I read this on my sample ballot, I thought, why are all these mailings and advertisements, largely from construction workers that want to build all of our new buildings, funded by us, don't say that? And so I kind of started like doing a little more research, and it actually left me kind of skeptical. It made me feel like maybe we're not getting this full scoop on what this means to the people of Fort Worth. Just a year ago, in the election of November of 2020, we voted for Prop A. The city of Fort Worth voted for Prop A, which funded more school initiatives. And here we are asking for $1.5 billion. It's like to me, it's kind of, it really blows me away. It's not just a rate for homeowners to have an increase in their property taxes. Everybody who rents will pay higher rent. And we already have ridiculous rent in this city. Everyone knows it. And so any kind of rate, any kind of tax, property tax increase will affect renters as well. So how is this, I just have a question for you guys. How is throwing more money in, okay.
Thank you.
More money's not going to help.
Angel Martinez will be followed by Sinclair Black.
Good evening. I'm here to continue to express my concern on the education and where it's going. First of all, I thank that guy for not wearing a mask. The rest of you, I've seen you without a mask in other events and when the cameras are not rolling, so you can stop with the gaslighting already. Why are we still talking about critical race theory? I know y'all are saying that it's not critical race theory, equity, gender theory, whatever you want to call it or whatever it is, it always hammers on this idea that minorities are inferior because of a system that white people created. This is false, and it's setting up the next generation for failure. Let's focus on math and science. Let's get those test scores up. Seriously, a C-rated district down from 2015? No shame? School board needs to focus on academic achievement instead of angering the parents and labeling them domestic terrorists. We know what CRT produces: angry, Latino, and Black, prejudice people, hate-filled, that leave voicemails on people that they don't agree with, filled with profanity. Is this a society that we want to build for the next generation? Is this really what you guys want? Really? It's shameful behavior. I'm done.
Thank you. Sinclair Black will be followed by Miriam Lambert. If Sinclair Black is not present, Miriam Lambert, are you present? Yes. Thank you.
This is the first time I've spoken, and I'd like to thank Laura Litton and Amanda Coleman for taking me through the process so that I could express myself. I'm here to discuss the bond issue that's up for a vote. While new and improved buildings provide comfort, only teachers can inspire minds. Regardless of what side of the aisle we're on tonight, all of us, everyone, is here because we love our children and want the best for our future. We can all agree that there is a necessity to teach math for budgeting. We might need a refresher course. English for communication, history to prevent making the same mistakes, and science for problem solving. With these tools, our future generation can wisely think for themselves. We are stewards of our children. They are not created to be our mini-me's, but rather to pursue their God-given purpose that they come up with, not what they're told to come up with. This will not happen by throwing money on outward things rather than developing inward character. Please vote no for the bond. We're throwing money after money, and not even a little bit of our education has increased. Please know that allow the teachers to be creative rather than boxed in by political curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike C. will be followed by Devin Claiborne.
Good evening. If you think $330,000 a year is an outrageous salary for a failing school superintendent who is a carpetbagger from Philadelphia, you haven't seen anything yet. This carpetbagger from Philly has gotten the Fort Worth ISD Board of Education to approve a resolution calling for a bond election for $1.4 billion. This election will be held November 2nd. According to the carpetbagger, it will not result in a property tax rate increase. This is not true. Here's why. Putting no tax increase in front of bonds is supposed to blunt the opposition to new taxes. But let's be clear, there is no special category of bonds that school districts issue that doesn't increase your taxes. No tax increase bonds increases your taxes. How? School districts regularly issue bonds to finance capital improvements like building new buildings or renovating existing infrastructure. Taxpayers pay off these bonds over time, usually via an increase to their property taxes. Bonds are issued for a specific period, and when they are paid off, taxpayers' tax bills go down. With a no tax increase bond, when a school district finds itself on the tail end of a bond payoff, it realizes that it can borrow more money without taxpayers paying more than they currently are. They simply tack more bonds on and add more years of payment. Everyone's taxes stay the same and the school district gets more money. But do you see the problem? No tax increase bonds actually do increase your taxes. If the district didn't issue new bonds after paying off the existing ones, your tax bill would go down. But it doesn't. That is the tax increase. First is not honest, and honesty is a short supply in contemporary politics. But our school leaders should be better than this. If they want more money for new high school, a new science lab, or a new football stadium, they have an obligation to be transparent with the people that are asking to pay for it. Playing a shell game or deflecting the true cost erodes the trust between the community and schools. Vote no on Prop A, B, C, and D. Thank you.
Thank you. Devin Claiborne will be followed by J.R. Martinez.
Devin Claiborne. I'll make this real quick for you. 3 words: educate, not indoctrinate. These programs are fueling hate. I am not an oppressor, nor are my children, and I don't ask any favor for my race. Stop dividing these young people. Since when do we erase history because we don't like it? CRT should be called creating racial tension. Until you all wake up, we will be fighting you. Way to go, Brandon.
Thank you. J.R. Martinez will be followed by Carlos Tercios.
Good evening, Board. On a different subject, first of all, I want to thank you for your renomination to the TAD Board again. I'm your TAD representative, and like I promised last year, after the election, I promised I would give you an update about what TAD has done this past year. So just here for give you a short update about TAD. So TAD certified the 2021 appraisal roll early on July 22nd. TAD has certified the roll on time for over the past 13 years. The certified roll, of course, you know, appraisal roll is the basis all taxing units use to determine their taxable revenue. In addition to that, in 2021, TAD processed over 150,000 taxpayer and agent protests. TAD accurately and timely transmitted monthly data updates to tax offices in Tarrant, Johnson, Denton, Dallas, and Parker counties. TAD continued to serve the public and perform appraisal responsibilities throughout the 2020 and 2021 COVID pandemic. In May of 2020, TAD employees returned to on-site work to finalize the 2020 appraisal roll and send appraisal notices to property owners. TAD has been on site ever since. TAD is gratified at the safety measures taken that allowed limited exposure and infection of the employees. TAD recently implemented an online homestead application process which allows property owners to file for exemptions without the need to go into the office. TAD continues to improve the online protest process and value negotiation tools which help facilitate resolutions in value disputes. TAD was recently recognized as one of the best places to work for in Fort Worth by Fort Worth Inc. magazine. TAD was ranked 27 out of 40. In May of 2021, TAD received the Government Finance Officers Associations of the United States and Canada Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This award was TAD's 32nd consecutive year of receiving the award. And finally, TAD has successfully passed all of the State Comptroller's Methods and Assistance Program reviews which evaluate and grades appraisal districts on governance, taxpayer assistance, operating procedures, and appraisal standards and procedures and methodology. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos Tercios will be followed by Holly Plemons.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent, Madam President Jackson. My name is Carlos Tercios, and I just want to bring up House Bill 3979. I want the Board to, of course, discuss and analyze how this law will actually affect the independent school district. I think it's important to analyze any items that may be tied to this law and how it may violate this law. I think that's a very fair conversation that y'all should be having because, of course, there have been lawsuits, there have been many legal complications that have been happening across the entire state of Texas. So to save taxpayers' money and to, of course, save a lot of time being wasted, I think it's important to analyze this law, see how it's applied in the independent school district, and actually follow it. Because whether you agree with critical race theory or not, the state of Texas passed this law. Governor Abbott already signed it into law, and I think it's important to follow the law, whether you agree with it or not. Thank you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Holly Plemons will be followed by Mary Lowe.
Tonight, I'd like to share with you all my outrage over Fort Worth ISD surveying my children without my permission. On Saturday, the Fort Worth ISD website posted an SEL, Social Emotional Learning Survey, that would be given to my kids on Monday. Saturday, there's no chance for me to get to talk to anybody about this. My emails have still not been returned. No sample questions for parents to review, no opt-in or opt-out form, no robocall, no text, no email, no remind, no nothing. You contacted me at least 50 times over free meals, but you did not contact me one time about this. And my contact information has not changed. You attempted to illegally survey my children. You violated Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment by sending this survey without my consent. You asked children, how much do you matter to others at school? Are you kidding me? You asked children this question and then you just left them alone with their thoughts on it? What if the student was doing the best that they could that day just to get there, and now they're flooded with these thoughts? You are not trained psychologists, and neither are our teachers, who will be the ones left to pick up the pieces from this disaster. Has Fort Worth ISD given guidance to teachers about this survey? The answer is no, you didn't. You did nothing. You just data mined my kids. You're collecting data on our children. You're sharing it with known CRT companies. Parents, wake up. Panorama app is on your students' devices. It's owned by a CRT company. SEL is CRT. Don't be fooled. They are pitting our children against each other and dividing us, creating problems where there are not any. If you want to fix racism, then take Morgan Freeman's advice and quit talking about it. Quit focusing on it. We are all just people. Every single Fort Worth ISD chart I see is divided by race. Enough of this political garbage. Garbage that Cento and others on this board have turned into a very lucrative career. Not my kids, not ever. Quit data mining our children, and especially without parental consent. It's illegal, but y'all don't even know how to run this ISD legally. We're gonna hold you accountable. Let's go, Brandon.
Mary Lowe will be followed by Joe Palmer.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Fort Worth ISD. My name is Mary Lowe. I'm the Tarrant County Chairman of an organization, Moms for Liberty. I'm sure by now you've all heard of Moms for Liberty. We're a national organization that works to keep parents and children's rights connected. I've been working in the outlying area and pulling a lot of FOIAs and open records requests centered around CRT, SEL. And one of the most disturbing things that comes up in every school district I pull is that Fort Worth ISD comes up. Your diversity and equity officer is referred to all of these other outlying on how to train and implement these programs. In nomenclature, locally, you're the head of the snake. So the second thing that I have great umbrage with is I've sat back and I've watched some things that you've been doing, and it doesn't really seem to matter whether it's a judge, the governor, or the legislator. The laws mean nothing to you. You do your own thing in every case. I could talk to you for hours about SEL, about CRT, what you're doing, the impact, why it's wrong, the laws you're violating. But at the end of the day, I look at this board and I'm here to tell you that teachers and administrators and board members have one great big way to impact those they are trusted with. And that is by trusting the parents and returning trust to them, and you don't. The second thing that you do is by how you lead with example, and the example that you set for every child in this district is one of lawlessness, and it's inexcusable. It's a silent conversation and a silent message, and it will reverberate over and over again. We got the UIL gender bill passed. We got House Bill 3979 passed and House Bill 1525, which is the opt-in for sex education. In regards to the survey I just asked, I'm asking the district to make a policy now that any survey in the future would be opt-in and that it would be published at least 2 weeks ahead of time. If you don't, we will bring that to fruition through the legislature in the 4th special session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the school board. My understanding is that staff has been instructed by the board president to ask people for their address prior to the sign-in process. If this had been implemented a year ago, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. But the circumstances today surrounding the actions of local taxing entities, the related growing concerns from constituents, and the recent calls for the FBI to begin overseeing these local meetings caused this to be a matter of bad timing. I shouldn't be asked for my address any more than I should be asking for your address. It would go a long way toward building trust if we were to treat each other as we would like to be treated. And as for the FBI, how ironic it would be for the same people objecting to a mandate from the governor of Texas to embrace the idea of bringing federal agents into our community now. So much for local control. I'm for local control. As we know, the most local control of all is that which rests with the individual. Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "Upon the altar of God, I have sworn eternal hostility toward every form of tyranny over the mind of man." Now, the phrasing "over the mind of man" is significant. All action originates and proceeds from thought. What worse form of tyranny than to subdue the mind through intimidation, threats of punishment for daring to speak out? You may remember a somewhat famous line, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Are you more free? More free to speak out, to share, to like, subscribe, to object, to attend a local school board meeting. I am asking for a motion and a second to dismiss all police from this meeting, save the number of police who would be here had the request not been made for the additional. There is militarization afoot, and it may be happening in parts of the world like Hong Kong, Italy, Spain, Canada, Portland, Australia, New Zealand, and it can be argued the extent to which this is necessary in those places. But it would be difficult to argue that it should happen in our local school board meetings. Round Rock ISD, the result of that was a lawsuit and probably a tax rate that would be voided out by a judge. Is that what you want? Show me the parents in this room from whom you are most afraid. I see only people who care for their children and for their civilization. It is okay to be angry with our elected leaders. It is okay to express this anger with words. This is a feature of our great system, and we should embrace it together. And I am notifying you of my intention to speak on item 5B, the hearing. And I would also like to join the others in my expression of frustration and contempt for the way the bond election has been presented by the superintendent going around the district, telling people that this will not affect your taxes. This will be a tax increase, and the ballot language is true and correct, and it is bad, it is wrong for you to go around the district telling people that the ballot language is inaccurate and incorrect. We are in error. We are acting in error going around the district telling people this thing. It's going to increase my taxes, and I'm against it. Vote no on the bond.
Thank you. D. Taggart will be followed by Carrie Raymeyer.
It is said by some that silence is complicity. I've been silent. I will be silent no longer. Communicating a strongly felt concern or public opinion before a crowd of highly educated individuals on a live streamed platform available for the general local public to watch on their TVs is intimidating for most individuals. And when the speaker's perceived gap between their own ability to communicate their concerns using their verbal adroitness to that of the group they're trying to speak before, to be heard and understood by, is so vast, many simply stay silent. The Board of Directors for the NSBA has now repudiated the letter, you know what letter I'm speaking about, written by its two top officials and sent to the current White House administration. But their apology was not sent to the stakeholders. It was sent to you, its members. That same NSBA represents Fort Worth ISD School Board. So I stand before you as an insulted stakeholder because I am neither a domestic terrorist nor have I ever given you any cause to feel threatened, and I ask for each of you to issue an apology to me and to all of your Fort Worth ISD stakeholders. Until I hear or read such an apology, I will consider your silence as complicity. Your NSB's attempts to silence and intimidate any and all who have the courage to stand before you for the 1 to 3 minutes you allow us before your proverbial throne to supposedly be heard. I implore you to keep in mind the very parents and students that you claim to seek equity for are the ones who are the most likely to feel the level of fear and intimidation created by this politically driven act of overly dramatic written rhetoric and theatrics. Do you truly want honest, heartfelt input from your community on issues that impact Fort Worth ISD and its students? Your decision to apologize or not will give us all the answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Parents and taxpayers, please vote no on the bond election. I can't trust this current board with $1.5 billion with all the poor decisions they've been making. Don't be fooled. It is a tax increase. It's no different than if you took out a loan, except that you'd be responsible spending it. It's easy for this board to spend our money. They've already spent hundreds of thousands fighting us parents on masks and suing the governor in a separate lawsuit. There was no reason to join, instead of following the law. COVID cases have plunged, masks optional.
I looked at it before I came. It's hardly anything. It's gone like that since school started. I expect this school to teach my child academics, and I can't believe how much this SEL and CRT junk is woven into everything. I'm finding more every day. The SEL is intrusive data mining, and the CRT is straight up racist. Norma Garcia Lopez was appointed to the Racial Equity Committee. I showed a board member what a complete and total racist she is by playing a voicemail that she left for me. That board member told me to write an email to the board. I did. I received no response. I can't imagine going through life judging people based on the color of their skin, but Fort Worth ISD Board is encouraging this in all of our students, in school, and through all of these equity programs, and by appointing racists to boards.
I'm sorry, but you can't play that. Please mute the mic.
With your white privilege, not caring about the well-being of others.
Madam Board President, we don't allow for individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Daniel and Ken Cool. Todd Daniel will be followed by Ken Cool.
Hi. I just got an email from somebody with Fort Worth ISD after a conversation we had about the SEL survey that you guys are initiating. Still have lots of questions, but I haven't had time to digest that full email, so I'm not going to talk about all that. I am against the bond. I think it's a gravy train for a bunch of contractors in Dallas. I saw one in Weatherford. The PAC that's for it, they put together $140,000 back in August. It's all contractors that bid on these things. Some of them probably related to the superintendent's friends at Presidio from Arizona. So I'm definitely against it. I want you guys to get our grades up and quit mining our kids' data. I don't think it's fair for you guys to ask our kids to log in and roster them with their class IDs and then look briefly at 25 pages of privacy policy written by lawyers. That the school district, most of them can't read anyway, apparently. So I don't think that's fair at all for you to put that on kids without asking their parents also. And it may be against several laws, and we'll find out about that. Anyway, I agree with everyone else that said that this equity, racial stuff needs to stop, and you need to teach our kids straight up academics, get the grades up. We can talk about bonds later. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Ken Cool.
I have some papers to distribute to the board. Good evening. Thank you, trustees, superintendent, and the amazing administrators of Fort Worth ISD. I appreciate your dedication to our students and to make their lives better. My name is Ken Cool. I am the Vice President of Advocacy for the Fort Worth ISD Council of PTAs. My goal in taking this role was to increase the advocacy voice of our parents that are involved in PTAs across the district. We felt that one way we could do that would be to send a resolution to our PTA members to vote on whether or not they supported the bond. A bond that improves the facilities for our students, aligns closely with PTA's mission to advocate for all children. We sent that resolution to our local memberships, and our members voted in favor of that resolution. I'll read a passage of the resolution. Whereas the members of the Fort Worth ISD Council of PTAs believe there will be benefits to all students and staff of Fort Worth ISD from the passage of the 2021 bond. Be it resolved that the Fort Worth ISD PTA membership supports the passage of the school bond referendums that will appear on the ballot on November 2nd. That will be sent around to you, the rest of that resolution. I also wanted to personally thank the Fort Worth ISD Division of Equity and Excellence for the important work that they do to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in Fort Worth ISD, as it also aligns easily with Texas PTA's diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, which is to continually, and I quote, to continually be a voice for all children by reflecting diversity and being inclusive in our membership, leadership, program content, advocacy, training, partnerships, and communications. I advocate also for all of you to join the PTAs in your district and at your children's school to advocate for them with a loud voice across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments and for being here this evening. We will now move on to calling our public hearing to order to discuss the district's 2021 financial accountability rating, School First. Dr. Scribner, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, President Jackson. At this time, we would like our Chief Financial Officer and Chief of Budget, Mike Ball and David Johnson, to begin our public hearing with regard to the financial accountability rating system first.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner. President Jackson, it's a privilege to present the report tonight to you that is required under state law annually for us to have a presentation about the district's rating and also to have a public hearing related to that. And Mr. David Johnson, our Senior Officer for Budget and Finance, will be actually making the presentation, and it's a privilege again to be before you. Thank you.
The purpose of School First is to ensure the accountability and disclosure practices, quality practices for financial management for the district, and to achieve improved performance in the management of the district's financial resources in order to provide the maximum allocation possible for the direct instructional purposes. Ratings are assessed based on 20 indicators with a resulting numerical score ranging from 0 to 100. It's an A through F system with a corresponding numerical score, A being 90 to 100 and so forth. The major areas assessed are critical indicators, solvency indicators, and financial competence. The critical indicators, there are 5 critical indicators. Fort Worth ISD passed all 4 critical indicators. They deal primarily with items like the audit. Did the district get an unmodified opinion on the annual audit? And of course we did. Timely payments, compliance with debt covenants, and those type of items. The solvency indicators look to the financial health of the district. They look at fund balance. They look at adherence to budgetary compliance, ability to administer the budget, and ability to pay debt, and the administrative cost ratio. Fort Worth ISD got 81 out of 85 points in the solvency indicators. And on the financial competence, those deal again with the audits, data feeds to the Texas Education Agency, and communications to the Board of Trustees. School First requirements, Fort Worth ISD must announce and hold a public meeting, which we're doing tonight, within 2 months of the release of the final first ratings. The final ratings became effective on September 9th, 2021. The notice of public meeting was published on October 15th of this year, and tonight we are holding the public hearing. Fort Worth ISD must prepare and distribute an annual financial management report, which we have done. That will be on the website tomorrow. In that financial management report will be a comparison of current and prior year ratings, disclosures required by Title 19 of the Texas Administrative Code, budgeting, accounting, and auditing, subchapter AA, disclosures required by the Commissioner's rules. The effective 8/16/15/2021 report is available on the Fort Worth ISD's website under the accounting page. Fort Worth ISD in 2021 received a superior rating with 96 out of 100 points scored. Fort Worth ISD has gotten that same superior rating for the past 5 years. I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions? Trustee Phillips.
Well, thank you, President Jackson. On one of the slides, it was saying like of the indicators that the fifth one would not be scored. What's, I guess if you could explain that a little bit.
The fifth indicator relates to the OPEB. It's an accounting pronouncement, and in 2018, I believe, Fort Worth ISD and districts across the state of Texas were required to record a TEA liability. It relates to the teacher retirement system. What that did is it even though it's not a district liability, it had to be reflected on the district's financial statements, and so that's the reason that one was removed from the critical indicators. Thanks for letting me to bring that up. Thank you.
Trustee Phillips, OPEB is other post-employment benefits, that it's a measure of liabilities that an employer would have after a person retires.
Thank you very much. That's all, President Jackson.
Thank you, Trustee Phillips. Any other questions? At this time, we will hear the sole speaker this evening, and that would be Mr. Joe Palmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, I'm just waiting to get recognized. I appreciate the work of financial staff for the district. I do have some concerns. I agree with those who wish to protect the teacher retirement. I think this is of paramount concern. One thing I did want to share with you this evening was this is a chart. I don't expect you to be able to see this. Maybe people at home can look this up and research it. These green bars represent the permanent school fund. Everybody here knows what the permanent school fund is. And again, you can't see very clearly, but over time, the permanent school fund has gone up. It's done fairly well over time. The significance of the permanent school fund is that it guarantees all of the school bond debt in the state of Texas, with the exception of Round Rock ISD. The reason I bring this to your attention is to show you the increased stress that is placed on the permanent school fund as a result of the increased rate of bond passage and the increased rate of debt, which is a function of the spending that these school districts, as Fort Worth ISD is obviously one of, is engaging in. Why does it matter? Because the more stress we put on this permanent school fund, that's going to make it harder for school districts to have a good bond rating. I know the superintendent goes around the district and likes to brag about the AA or AA plus bond rating that the school district has, but compared to other school districts, it's really not any better or any worse. The reason you can talk about AA plus and AAA bond rating is, of course, you can, if somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, you can sell their home on the courthouse steps for $1, and the buyer pays all the back taxes. Let's be honest, school districts have a collection rate that's the envy of the pawn shop, to be quite honest with you. And the other reason that you have a good bond rating is that it's guaranteed by this fund. So again, I hope I'm getting through. As more pressure gets put on this fund, it's going to put pressure on the bond ratings, and it's going to make it harder for school districts to borrow money for things they actually need. I would submit to you that things that you don't actually need would be things like 3 stadiums, multiple stadiums during a pandemic, during an economic downturn when inflation is off the charts. I don't use that phrase very often. It's one of those phrases I'm tired of, but it truly is off the charts because nobody knows the true effects of inflation as of yet, but we will find out. Solvency, some of the metrics that were presented, they're right there on the screen. Again, I'm grateful for the financial staff of the district, very much so. I would like to see this presented in such a way as to compare to other districts. It's very important to see where Fort Worth ISD is compared to other districts in the state. I'm not trying to show parents in the district something that would cause them to move out of the state, out of the district, but you know, how am I supposed to know that 81 out of 85 is good or bad? How am I supposed to know that? How am I supposed to know that? I mean, I'll give you 15 out of 15. But you know, these other metrics, I don't have anything to measure them by. And as far as spending goes, and as far as just general financial custodianship of the district, I was at Northside High School last night for the, I don't see a timer. This is a hearing.
Thank you. 3-minute limit. I'm
You're
sorry,
giving
Mr.
3
Palmer.
minutes for a public hearing.
Thank you. This time, we'll close the public hearing. We'll move to reports and presentations, number 7 on the agenda. Dr. Scribner, I will turn it over to you to introduce Vicki Burris, the Chief of Capital Improvement Program.
Thank you very much, President Jackson. At this time, our Chief of the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, Vicki Burris, will make a presentation along with the Chair of our Citizens Oversight Committee, Mr. Tim Carter.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner. Good evening, President Jackson, members of the board, Dr. Scribner. I'd like to introduce Mr. Can we hear you? All right. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tim Carter. He's the chairman of our 2017 Citizens Oversight Committee for the district's 2017 bond program. He's here tonight to present a short overview of the bond program from a perspective of the COC membership. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Vicki. Really glad to be here to represent a committee that really, on your behalf, works very hard to make sure that monies from 2017 are spent in the appropriate way. And also, I appreciate your volunteer and your service to this community. We have 3 members here. They're right behind me. I'd like them to stand up if possible. Christine Moss, who everybody knows, she's a serial volunteer, attends every one of our meetings and asks some great questions. Libby Willis. And Cal Silverberg. Am I going to be one of those people that can't run it?
I don't know. Let me see if I can do it for you.
Okay, my presentation's finished. Thank you very much.
We're trying to advance.
And Vicki, I think we also have Mary Alice Suarez here as well.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm going to start at what I call 30,000 feet, and then we're going to go down. And I think the some of the pictures you're going to see at the end of this tell the whole story of what's happening and why it needs to happen. This is obviously the 17 bond timeline. I'll show that in a second. Then we'll go through the scheduling and phasing of all the projects. We'll give you a financial update on where we are. We'll give you a hub update, which is historically underutilized businesses. Very proud of what the district has done here. And then a construction update. So, this is a slow one. Let me just get, there we go. November 2017, $750 million bond issue passes. We've, since that time, 12 projects have been completed. Those were called quick start projects, mostly athletic, to get the athletic centers up and running, and then a new school. 10 projects have been completely closed out, and construction has started on all projects, and you'll see that in the next slide. And we're supposed to finish up in 2023. Everything's on time and on budget, but there's a proviso there in that we're starting to feel some of the constraints of the supply chain, especially in furniture and some things. And so I think everybody's done a great job of ordering and getting things here during COVID, and we're doing very well, but there could be a couple of hiccups as we move forward, as you all know. This is a busy slide. It's the current scheduled phasing plan. At the very top of the slide, it's hard to see. Everything in green are completed projects. Those are the athletic fields and Overton Park Elementary. The thing that's below that is you see all blue. And all blue means that construction has started. There is no more design. There is no more procurement. Everything is construction, and you could see it flows out to 2022, 2023. The one thing this board was put together for was to oversee $750 million and make sure it got spent in the right way, along with your board also. This is some of the dollars that have been paid for the projects. Encumbered dollars are ones that have been contracted for now. Available dollars, or especially with these larger projects at the end, there's a lot of renovation. So there's money budgeted, and there has to be money left over because you don't know what you're going to find sometimes in renovations. You can do a lot better estimating when you have new construction. Some of these funds might be used for what's called campus betterment. And when you see some of the pictures, you'll see some of the opportunities that are still there on these. But 71% of the funds have been paid out. Program that this board and this community ought to be proud of is the historically underutilized businesses. 42.16% are hub businesses. I serve on 2 other boards in the region, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, which represents 5 states, and the North Texas Tollway Authority, and we spend a lot of time on making sure that we're doing fairly all parts of our business with the community. And under this hub program and under this contract for $750, y'all can be very proud that you're at 42%. Most organizations don't get there. In fact, Cal told me today he was monitoring the Chicago Transit Authority, which was bragging that they were at 20%. So this is very, very good in terms of what's going on. I will say that one of our meetings, Ms. Moss and others, we brought up the fact at the very top, you say 6.67% African American male, and we wondered if this was a low number. And so we put together a special group with outsiders, vendors, contractors, and looked at this and found that it's not a low number in comparison to what the city of Fort Worth looks at as underutilized businesses. But the task force came up with 8 different initiatives that we believe that could help. I think y'all will be seeing those down the road just in terms of how to help underutilized businesses really get into the business of working with the school district. Okay, well, here's the proof in the pudding. These pictures next are the before pictures and after as far as we're at. The completed projects, as you can see, are some of the athletic areas, and then I'll go into the construction update. All are on plan. All will hopefully be finished by 2023, and you can see where we are. One of the projects that's closest to my heart, I sit on the advisory board for the YMLA, and that school really needed an upgrade. And you can see the before picture. You can see the track up high, and this is the after picture. The green building is the high school. The white piece of concrete back there is going to be the new competition gymnasium and meeting area. And so it's going to be finally a place where kids that on Fridays wear coats to school will be proud to do it. Next picture is Western Hills. This is the before picture. I think you'll be surprised at this next one. Look at this. That stairway was not there. The front of the school at night looks beautiful. If I was a student, I'd like to go to this school. Trimble Tech, pretty embarrassing picture. Even in '73, I didn't have those lockers. But look at this after. Engineering, cooking, cosmetology areas. Tanglewood. Look at the old industrial bathrooms, the auditorium, and the library. Tanglewood renovation after. New bathrooms, playgrounds, landscaping. The library is very beautiful. Southwest. The front entry, you can see some of the classrooms, and afterwards, look at that front entrance. I'd be proud to go there. I'd also say it competes with charter and private schools. South Hills, large green triangle, and of course, the ever-present, I call them shacks from my era, but they're temporaries or something, right?
Yeah, portable buildings.
Portable buildings. But here's the redo. And look at this, it's beautiful. A full soccer field, and it's the largest building that the school district is undertaking right now. Polytech, again, you can see down below, temporaries in the library. Look where we're headed with this. And a welcome board that shows the history of Polytech. And lit areas where kids can sit down and actually feel good about things. Pascal. And afterwards, the new entrance. And the picture at the top right is very interesting. That was kind of hidden before all this work started. And it's actually on the picture below, it's the far side of where this picture is pointing. But you can just see how beautiful this building and what the redo has started to accomplish. O.D. Wyatt, large blank parking lot right there at the back. O.D. Wyatt, that's what's been built on top of that parking lot with a new entrance to the school. And you can see the meeting areas down below. North side. Tough picture to even see. North side now, mariachi complex, labs, and cosmetology. Eastern Hills, look at the library, how the books were held. Look at it now. This is the one that really gets me the most. This is the entrance to Dunbar. Before. How would you like to walk in that every day? This is the entrance to Dunbar now. Diamond Hill Jarvis. Some of the old industrial tile. Look at Diamond Hill Jarvis now. Benbrook. You can see the outline yellow. And look at that building now. Some things that I've learned about betterment, if you look at the building on the top right next to the nice white roof, you can see a whole lot of AC units. And look at the number of AC units on the left side. That's called betterment, efficiency, and a lot less power usage. Arlington Heights didn't look so great back there, and it's taken shape. Brand new building, really nice. And by the way, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., there's going to be an open house to let the public see what's happening there. And the last slide, Amon Carter Riverside. You can see the computers and the front of the school. Look at those windows and look what they look like then. Look like they look like now. That's just replacing windows, adding staircases, and a new baseball field. So in closing, I'd just like to say I'm proud to serve on this committee. It is a good committee. The staff under Vicki and everybody that attends these meetings has done a very, very good job. Presidio has done a very, very good job. Barry Brock and Brian Johnson, who are here. We've also taken a hard look at internal audit and how internal audit is keeping up with the construction. They come to every one of our meetings and we talk about what's happened there. I know they report to you. I would just say that I think that this is what kids need. And I will say when the bond issue passes, we can continue to make middle schools the best they can be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner, Vicki, Tim, Citizens Oversight Committee. Thank you all for being here. I'll ask at this time if any board members have any comments. I will say that was an amazing presentation, and most of all, I can't get over Western Hills and that green, that neon. It gets me every time. But South Hills is a close second, especially with the curves.
Well, I know everybody in this room has their favorites, so.
Well, you know, I'm taking a risk because I should have a favorite of Polly and Eastern Hills here. Stepping outside my comfort zone. Thank you all so much.
Shelby, can I say something?
Yes, Trustee Dar.
Just real quickly, I'm sorry that I kind of thought of this at the last minute. I saw some pictures of Pascal High School this week that were, what delighted me in these pictures is that they were taken by a student who was so excited about the change in the building where she chooses to learn every day. And I've had kids at Pascal High School for 8 years now, and I will tell you, I never knew that beautiful facade even existed until we started this process of remodeling. And for those who don't know, that actually is the original McLean Middle School. And it has been inside of that building and covered by greenery, and there was an atrium right there, and I never knew it existed. It is stunning. It is striking. And the nurse, whose office is right across the hall from that area, said she just was so tickled all week by kids when they opened up that area about at their responses to that, and the fact that they felt validated and important, and they loved the new look, and they were so excited to be a part of the Pascal family at that moment. Now, I can speak for that one school, but I know that that's happening all over Fort Worth ISD. And I know that I want to work in a place that is clean and updated and current and looks like people care about where I am, and I want for kids to be able to do that too. So thank you for your volunteering, and thank you for your service to this community. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dar, and thank you all again. It's amazing. At this time, we'll move on to Goal Progress Measure Update, Goal 1 of Lone Star Governance, and I will hand it over to Dr. Scribner to introduce the 3 staff members who will take us through this goal.
Thank you very much, President Jackson. At this time, we will provide the board with our Goal Progress Measure Update, Goal 1, Early Literacy, and providing that progress update will be our Chief Academic Officer, Marcia Sorensen, Chief of Schools, Jerry Moore, and Associate Superintendent, Sarah Rispey.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner. Good evening, Board. We're happy to bring you an update this evening on goal number 1, our early literacy. I'll just remind you of the goals. I know you're familiar with them, but quickly and for the audience, we have goal number 1, which is about 3rd grade reading scores and the percent of students who meet grade level or above on the STAR reading test. We had no STAR, as the big blue box shows us, in 2020 during the break for the pandemic. We did take STAR last year and had students scoring at 26%. We still have the goal of 40% for this coming year, now with our students all back for in-person learning. This next slide shows you the goals for each student group, leading to that 40% for all for 2022 STAR. Goal Progress Measure 1.1 is a circle for the pre-K students. They take this test for to see if they're on track for phonological awareness as a precursor to reading. So prior to the pandemic, we had students at about 80% in 2019. We did not have end-of-year data in 2020, of course. 2021, we were at 78, so a slight decrease. Our goal for 2022 is 83% of pre-K students to be on track by June. And then here are our goals by student group. Just a reminder that phonological awareness, sometimes we use a lot of education language, is the students' awareness of letters and groups of letters and the sounds that they make. And so those are the things that we really track closely for pre-K and kinder. And then as students start moving up in the grade levels, we look more at reading of words and sentences. So for our progress this fall, our beginning of year testing with Circle for our pre-K students, you can see the 2 bars. The tan bar shows you fall of 2020 compared to fall of 2021. So you see that there was no difference for last year or this year for the beginning of the year in students who tested in English. About 2/3 of our students test in English, about 1/3 test in Spanish at pre-K, and we saw a gain of 3 points for those who tested in Spanish compared to beginning of year last year. So this is how our pre-K students came to us for beginning of the year. Let's look at that English group by student group and break that down, and here you will see the percentage of on track remain pretty steady for the students tested in English. There was a little decrease in the Hispanic students who tested in English, but overall not a lot of variation there. Another test that we give at the beginning of the year is our Texas Kindergarten Entry Assessment. This isn't part of the board goals, but it is related to reading in Goal 1, so we wanted to bring you that additional information. Again, we're going to have that tan bar that shows us fall of 2020, and then the darker gray bar shows us the fall of 2021. And this is for kindergarten students. So we see a large increase for the students who are tested in English from comparing 20 to 2021, and a slight decrease for the of students who tested on track in Spanish. We looked into this a little bit. That gave us pause to wonder why that difference. I can't tell you a cause per se, but the one thing that we found different about the two groups was that during their pre-K experience, these same kindergarten children, more of the children who tested in English were in-person learners for pre-K than the students who tested in Spanish. So about 2/3 of the English testers attended pre-K in person, when only about half of those who tested in Spanish. That may have had some impact, but I think that over the course of this year, with all of our students in person, we will be able to make sure that everyone gets on track in this important skill. Here is the breakdown for the English students testing for each student group, and you see that every single group showed those large increases when comparing fall of 2020 to fall of 2021. And we do know that those are not exactly the same. We've had some interruptions, and I won't go through all of those with you, but we are comparing the closest that we have here. I also wanted to share that we continue to see students entering kindergarten are better prepared if they attended Fort Worth ISD pre-K than students who did not. We don't know for those who did not attend Fort Worth if they attended a different pre-K, but just overall, those two groups compared, students who did not attend Fort Worth ISD pre-K, 41% were on track. Of the students who attended Fort Worth ISD pre-K, 69% were on track. So a nice credit there to our pre-K teachers and the work that they are doing with our students to get them on track and ready for kindergarten. Our next goal progress measure looks at map reading fluency. Fluency, again, is a key component for reading, and so we look at that specifically for our youngest learners, K through 3. The key indicator for kindergarten is phonological awareness, which we've been looking at, and then in grades 1 through 3, we start looking at sentence reading fluency. Last year, our goal was 41%. Students exceeded that goal. We hit 48% of students meeting or exceeding grade level expectation. Our goal this year is 43, and it's our expectation that we should again exceed that goal. This is that same 43% goal broken out by student group, and you can see the year before when we exceeded what each group did. And then let's look at just our beginning of year data, comparing 2021 to 2022. The first box has phonological awareness for kindergarten, and the second box has the sentence reading fluency for first, second, and third grade. Starting with the kindergarten, we see the red bar is the 2021 beginning of year data compared to the blue bar, which is the current beginning of year data. I want to remind the board, this is almost like a new baseline this year for us because of the differences in the start of school time. You'll remember last year at this time, we phased in starting school, and so different student groups, we all started virtual, then different groups phased in. That also changed our testing time, so we tested much earlier this year. We expect that by middle of year, we'll see some of these differences disappear and hopefully be trending more positive for all grade levels this year. But it's about a 6 weeks difference in testing this year compared to last year. When we get to middle of the year, the testing will be at the same time this year and last year. So you see there that small decrease in phonological awareness for the kinder group, slight decreases in first and second, and actually, despite the earlier testing, an increase in the third grade. And I'll remind you again that we do expect that first graders will be less likely to be proficient in sentence reading than second graders, and then again third. So those skills continue to develop, and we want to see those higher at those higher grade levels. This is that same information broken by student group for you. We saw a nice 4-point gain in the Hispanic students that were testing English, and then all of the other groups, consistent with what we just saw on the other slide, had slight decreases. Our last goal progress measure for Goal 1 is 1.3, and this is MAP growth reading. Here we're going to look at kinder through third grade students who meet or exceed their projected growth on MAP growth reading by the end of the year. And I want to remind the board that this was a baseline last year, and so the goals that you see here are just proposed goals so that we had something to look at. I know that the board will be meeting in the future to set the goals on these baseline indicators. So those are just proposed goals for the board to consider, definitely worth conversation. Here are those same things by student group. And now for the beginning of year data for fall of 2021, on average, we see that light gray bar is last year, the darker turquoise bar is this year. On average, we see that students in K1 and grade 3 had slightly lower performance or RIT scores. That's what the performance score is called on the MAP test. At the beginning of year, however, students in grade 2 had a 1-point increase. We do have that same timing difference here of about 6 weeks difference in when the test was given this year to when the test was given last year, which may have an impact on our beginning of year performance, but should even out by middle of the year when we're testing at about the same time. The little dot that you see there between the two bars is the national norm, and I have it on a chart there for you as well, just so that you will see. National norm data are only available in English at this time. They don't have enough records of Spanish testing yet to set norms, so we may see those in the future. So that's an English norm that we're comparing to, though the students can test in English or Spanish. Finally, I wanted to show you our MAP growth reading projection. One of the other things that we get from our MAP data is a projection to STAR. So the NWA, the company that puts out MAP, which is a nationally norm reference test, does comparison to some state tests and uses all the data for the state to project. This shows us with the gray bar what our last year's STAR meets or above was, and we saw that on the first slide. It was 26. This is our beginning of year projection based on English reading. They only have the projections for reading, so English. So it's not exact comparison because the gray bar has English and Spanish in it, but it gives us an idea that we are currently on track to meet where we were last year. We know obviously that our goal is now to exceed where we were last year, and we will be looking at this closely and report back to you at middle of the year. They will update that projection, and so when we do our middle of year testing, we can bring you a middle of year update. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Sorensen to talk about some of the things that we are doing to beat that projection.
Thank you, Board. Dr. Scribner. Want to talk a bit about the focus on implementation. So we here in Fort Worth ISD have really dug into our reading academies. Last year, we did a focus on our Tier 3, 4, and 5 campuses to go through the reading academies first. And I'm happy to report that over 80% of the teachers in Tier 3, 4, and 5 campuses completed the reading academies. We had 88% of our administrators complete, as well as our campus instructional coaches and assistant principals. So completed really well. This year, the Reading Academies is focused in our Tier 1 and 2 campuses. And so that is really giving our teachers, our administrators, and our campus instructional coaches, assistant principals, strong foundation in the type of literacy instruction that we need to see every day in the classroom. We also have adopted new materials in English and in Spanish to support our students that are now more in alignment with the pedagogy and practice that it is that we're looking to see in terms of our literacy instruction. Do want to pull out that there are 3 of our pyramids going through a pilot adoption. Materials recommended by TEA, grounded in disciplinary literacy and foundational literacy skills, and those pyramids are there: O.D. Wyatt, Eastern Hills, and Carter Riverside. As a district, though, we are immersed in professional learning at this point. Really engaging in evidence-based practices, both in English and Spanish, to support our biliteracy model as well. To learn really foundational skills on how to teach students how to read. So we are immersed in a lot of professional development outside of the reading academies as well. Want to remind our board that we are in year 2 of our literacy and biliteracy frameworks, and of course our extended learning opportunities for students, including Saturday Learning Quest and summer launch this past summer. And we will continue to look for more opportunities to engage students outside of the school day. Wanted to give you, again, just a high-level approach, our literacy plan, the approach to effective literacy instruction. Again, our 6 guiding principles, and if I were to bullet out one of those that I really want the board to hear us around, is the systematic, explicit instruction that has to take place in the classroom every single day. That is also coupled with, again, if I'm pulling out a big shift, it is the increase in instructional time. How we use our instructional minutes in the classroom matters every single day. How much direct and explicit instruction are students getting, as opposed to how much time are they spending in small group instruction. The 4 fundamentals of our literacy instruction are here. Again, the adoption of high-quality, evidence-based materials has been an addition that we've brought to the district, also culturally and linguistically responsive for our students. And our pedagogical shift really was from balanced literacy, a practice that we had in the district, to the science of reading, all in alignment with HB3 and the reading academies. So just, again, bringing your attention to that, we have an instructional framework and streamlined assessments to support the progress monitoring that we need in order to make sure that we're intervening and supporting as needed, as well as accelerating the students that need acceleration, which is all of our students in our daily instruction, but really looking at campuses where students may be meeting, where we can always seek to approach and move to masters. So again, want to bring this back to the board as a reminder of the end of the year map. This was last year's data, and what we have here is the observed growth is the blue, is the purplish bar, and the orange diamond is our grade level projected growth. We exceeded, I want to again acknowledge, we exceeded in our kindergarten through 5th grade, the projected national norms. So what we know is that when we focus on the right materials, the right instruction, the right pedagogy, we can move student scores and meet expectations of the board. Want to also point out another piece of data is there was a report, a study done by Reed Fort Worth that did a small analysis of after-school pilot programs. And as you can see from the center graph, the students in the Fort Worth after-school pilot program that followed our curriculum and our program implementation exceeded the other programs. 96% of the students in the pilot program showed growth. Again, grounding the board in that we will not be remediating ourselves out of this. Tier 1 instruction is where we need to be every single day, making sure that our students are receiving grade level instruction every single day in every single subject, and providing the scaffolds and supports where we need in order to support our students as they move through the continuum of their grade level instruction. And our work, as I partner with Mr. Moore, as we implement with fidelity on our campuses, the things that we lay out here in the plan, and I think Trustee Phillips always says the plan is great, and so let's implement. And so as we think about resetting, responding, redefining, and reinforcing, right, we are in always a continuous improvement cycle here in Fort Worth ISD as we use our data, we use our resources, we support our principals, we support our teachers as they transition to new pedagogy and new practice, but really reinforcing that the practices that we're leaning on here are evidence-based and work for all students and work better than other practices that we may have been using in the past. So I turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Moore, as he walks us through our instructional and leadership priorities.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. Implementation. Trustees, I'd like to draw your attention to this slide that you see in front of you. Hopefully this slide looks familiar. We brought this slide to you several times this past spring. This is a representation of the instructional priorities that we asked our campuses to focus on in their support of students, teachers, and our student learning. As a quick reminder, this was the focus for our work to recover from COVID this past spring. As you heard Dr. Sorensen reference earlier, when we focus on the right work and we implement with effectiveness, our students grow. Our MAP data from middle of year to end of year showed us that, and that was an intentional focus on these instructional priorities. But the growth of our students isn't where we stop. The growth is with all of us in the educational world here in Fort Worth ISD. One of the biggest things that we've learned as we work through this COVID experience is that we need to look at how we support our campuses, our students, and our teachers in a different manner. How can we support our campuses differently? This slide represents our strategic priorities that we must focus on to attain educational excellence. On this slide, you will see three major themes represented in these 6 priorities. You will see the theme of establishing positive campus culture, both with our students and our staff. You will see us with the priority of embracing a data-informed approach to support student growth. And you will also see that we recognize that we are in a process of a major learning curve, and that we all must embrace our professional learning and look at the work that we have to do around developing ourselves and developing our professional learning. And how do we support that attainment of this educational excellence? Well, the support has already begun, and has begun with our principals by identifying our leadership priorities. How do we attain educational excellence? By leading through a time of change. The actions our school leaders will embrace to support teacher and student learning. I'll draw your attention to the alignment between the educational excellence priorities and the leadership priorities that you see here. You'll hear me say again, data-informed culture, focused on student and staff culture, professional learning for all. This demonstrates that your academics and school leadership team are 100% on the same page. The biggest difference that we will have to gain the outcomes that we look for our students here in Fort Worth ISD is those 2 divisions of this school district being aligned, supporting our campuses, supporting our students, and looking for aligned outcomes for the students of Fort Worth ISD. With this effort, we know that we can achieve the student outcomes that we need here in Fort Worth ISD that our community rightfully deserves. We appreciate your time this evening, and we would all be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Our first question comes from Trustee Jacinto Ramos. Second will be from Trustee Dar, and the third will be from Trustee Evans.
Yeah, thank you, President Jackson. So just kind of trying to get a good feel for what we had discussed at our last board workshop as to, the first part is with these goal progress measures, do you feel that they're going to be predictive of the outcome? Just knowing that this is tied to the superintendent's evaluation, that the main role that we have is to monitor the goals by way of the goal progress measures. I'm not convinced right now that these goal progress measures are predictive of the student outcomes. That's first and foremost. So I guess I'd like to start there is, do you as a team, who this is your job, this is your role, part of how I lean into governance is to say, do you really think that these are predictive? Because as we go through the board goals again and the progress measures, I'm going to be a little bit more rigid in saying, look, the last set that y'all gave us didn't really seem like they were predictive of the student outcomes. And the data spoke for itself, right? So as I'm looking at this and I look at these gaps, particularly like I thank you, Mr. Rispy, you mentioned, and I took notes on that. I look at, and I've got to isolate the conversations, right, the data points on our Spanish-speaking students continue to lag behind. And then in some cases, our brown students, tend to be doing better in some cases. I'm not really looking for, don't really know, kind of looking to see if they close those gaps, because I've gone 8.5 years of that kind of narrative. I'm really leaning into this to say, please tell me that your goal progress measures are going to be predictive, and tell me that your interventions are going to begin to close gaps and not let another 3-4 years go by that those gaps are not being closed. So let me go to that one, right? So page 9, where that's where I began to take notes on that one. The TXKEA, we're looking at GPM 1.1. What kind of interventions are we looking at? I guess that's my first question with that one.
So I can take that first. I think the first intervention, if I could just speak candidly, it's that students are back in school. As we dug into this data a bit, we really did try to get as granular as we could around the testing situations that students were in at the beginning of the year. So our first intervention just is being in school, as we know that there is no replacement for in-person instruction. But in terms of what it is that we're doing here, we have rewritten our kindergarten through second grade curriculum to be more rigorous, more aligned to standards, more aligned to the phonological and phonemic awareness, both in Spanish and in English, with the addition of new resources. So there's a new approach happening in that K-2 space that the teaching and learning team took on as a collaborative team, not only in individual subjects, to make sure that there was coherence and alignment both in what we were teaching and in the resources and materials that we were using in that space.
Okay. Do we have like some really long-term plans for literacy with our language learners, our SPED, our low socioeconomic student populations?
Yes, the literacy plan that we just showed you in
Right.
its boxes, that's at a 30,000-foot approach. But the literacy plan is grounded in the science of reading, which means that we are teaching our kids knowledge of words and word parts, which is phonics. We are focusing on comprehension. We are focusing on fluency. And we are working on writing every single day in Tier 1 instruction as a part of the literacy plan. We are also, again, I cannot underscore how we use our instructional minutes in the classroom has been dramatically revamped. Just using an example is that at one point, students would spend the preponderance of time in small group instruction and not receive direct instruction from our teachers. We now have said students need more systematic, explicit, direct instruction from our educators, and we have provided professional development, and we will continue to provide professional development and the resources, the adoption of Lexia, NIHouse, Estrelita, Esperanza, Lunita, Escalera, all of that to support our students. That is in alignment with the practices that we are implementing now.
So I don't know half of those groups you mentioned, but I guess my main question would be, is that what we've been using to keep getting us the same, or are we switching it up now?
We switched it up now, as well as a dual language model that emphasizes biliteracy, as well as we are looking at the three pyramids that are going through the Amplify pilot, which then also lifts up literacy and biliteracy. And we're watching those three pyramids very closely to potentially expand that pilot. But again, I think it's too early for us to say. We want to see what the outcomes.
And Mr. Ramos, if I can add one more thing, excuse me. I flip back to the graphic of the literacy plan that Dr. Sorensen went through with the board. You've heard us talk about our literacy plan for the last couple of years. And we've been intentional these last 2 years about creating and changing our approach to teaching literacy. What I wanted to reinforce is this plan is now in place. And the charge that we have in front of us right now is effectively implementing the new change, the new shift in instructional practice. Not only what we're asking of our teachers, but what we're asking of our administrators, and the growth. You heard me say earlier that we're all in this major learning curve. That we have to see ourselves as professional learners, how we're developing ourselves and our skills. The reading academies that Dr. Sorensen referenced are a major shift for how we're going to improve how we're teaching literacy. But our administrators understanding what to look for in those classrooms, being participants in those reading academies, and us working together from school leadership and academics together to know what we're looking for and how we provide that guidance to our teachers really is a huge shift. along with the additional high-quality materials, the new materials we're putting into our classroom. So it really has been building for the last 2 years, and now it's time for us to deliver on that plan that's been created.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I definitely don't want to be one of those board members that's beating up on administrative team and the superintendent, right, just for whatever. But I mean, you understand that when you reference the plan, I've been here 8.5 years. There's always a new shiny plan on how we're going to get this done. So I hope you can understand my right? Like I'm trying to trust. I really am. I'm trying to stay in my role as a governing board member, and yet, as I've just probably in the last couple of years learned, that this is actually where my job is at. To ask the hard questions, to say, are we switching it up? Are we staying with the same players? Because if we're staying with the same players and you say that that's what's going to get us there, then by all means. But I'm also, as I look at the administrative team, I'm looking for that slide that says, and maybe it's middle of the year, but I'm looking for that one slide that breaks this down simply without looking at 20-something pages. Are we getting better? Are we staying the same? Or are we getting worse? And I have to look through a bunch of pages here to try to figure that out. And I get conflicting narrative in this, right, for me. I mean, please go ahead. I see your face and your...
I would say I would take you to this slide to
Which
really...
Slide 23.
Slide
Okay.
23. This was our end-of-year MAP assessment. We doubled down, to use a phrase, but we doubled down on what it is that we were expecting to see in classrooms and implement with fidelity and with a strong sense of urgency the plan that we have outlined here. And I think here is the evidence that you're looking for to say that when we do the right work and we do it with fidelity and we do it daily, our students and our schools demonstrate growth exceeding the national projected growth norms during a pandemic. I mean, we're still in a pandemic, but nonetheless, I mean, so here's the slide that I would take you to.
So I actually was going to end there, and I would honestly say I'd rather start here than to have to dig in page 23.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And while I celebrate that we are beyond the national norm, the rest of it also shows that we're behind in a lot of other areas. So let's be real, right? Like,
Yep.
I think that's the part that I'm at. Is I want the good, the bad, and the ugly with the data and the information. I'm not looking to get 20-plus pages before I get to the meat of it, because then my question would be, right, and I think you've probably explained that, we get to grade 6 and then it takes a dip and then all of a sudden we're off.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I guess my question is, am I hearing that the board ought to also be focused on 6th through 8th, right?
Yep.
Maybe that's
Yes,
a
sir.
goal that
Yes,
the
sir.
board ought to consider adopting. Like, we've got 2 more goals to work with, right? Because if what we focus on and what we budget towards more likely to get done, I'm looking at the whole thing, right? So I'm looking at the real conversation. I don't want to come back 2-3 years later and then say, well, board, we put that page on 23 and you all decided not to do anything with it. Looking for that dialogue as we go through this governance journey a little bit further about looking at this on the front end. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because what I believe to be true is that boards can get flooded with data, and then I'm trying to figure out where and how we're moving. I don't think it should be that complex. I should know, are we getting better, are we not, or are we stagnant? And then what are the interventions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, Trustee Ramos. And one thing I want, in the sense of real conversation here, I want to draw your attention to this slide and make sure that you recognize that this is a slide demonstrating growth of our students. This is a slide demonstrating that our students grew at greater than expected projections. Now, that doesn't speak to the achievement of our students. But one of the things that Dr. Sorensen and I continue to remind each other is that the road to increased student achievement has to start with growth. And so when you're looking for how do I tell if we're staying stagnant or if we're improving, this is what you need to be looking for. Every time we bring you data, you need to be able to see that did our students grow from where they were previously? Did our students take that next step in their growth? Because if every time we bring you data, we show students that are growing, that's going to be the road that leads us to increased student achievement, which is what our ultimate outcome is.
Growth is the road to mastery.
Yo, that road I hear it, but I got to push back because my lived experience is sitting in this chair. I've heard a lot of that. Now, it's, again, not knocking on you per se. It's just I want to make sure that there's a clarity in communication of how this work is supposed to be done, right? Like boards, we are to govern. We are to lean into this portion. This is our work. And you all are to convince us that this is the right path and then demonstrate to us quarterly, right, that we're moving in that direction. So I just wanted to establish that language, and I wanted to really say, like, staff, I'm looking for a page 23 to be towards the front end versus kind of towards the back end.
We can do that.
Just be real with us. But I'll speak for what's true for me. Be real with me. Where are we really at? And because I want to be able to shout from the mountaintop that we're doing great, right? I want to be able to go to page 23 and tell my community and all of Fort Worth ISD, this is where we're at. But at the same time, when we do disaggregate the data, and brown children and language, different language and low socioeconomic, I got to be able to speak to that too, because I happen to be in a community that represents those categories. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Trustee Dar.
Thank you, President Jackson. And I'm going to springboard on a couple of comments made by Trustee Ramos, but also by Mr. Moore and Dr. Sorensen. The sixth grade on page 23, have we analyzed why that took a dip? Because the data doesn't do us any good if we're not using the data to make it change.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. And I think what it comes back to is we're looking at the implementation in our campuses at this time. That's one of the reasons why we're being intentional about this partnership between academics and school leadership and making sure we're on the same page. Because we can put a great plan in place, but if we are not making sure that it's implemented effectively at each school, in those schools where our students need the greatest improvement and greatest support, then we're going to continue to see our trend go in the wrong direction. So we've been intentional about the work that we're doing with our campus leaders and with our teachers, especially in our middle grades, not only in reading but in math as well, and looking at implementing the plan that we have in place. That's really good. What's going to be the key as we move forward, and that's something that we can commit to with each of you, is bringing more specifics about how are we implementing the plan at each of our campuses, so you can see what this data tells us is when we implement with fidelity, our kids grow. And so we need to be able to show you where that's happening and where it's not happening.
Agreed. So we're comparing with the rest, not the pre-page 23, we're comparing the data from last year to this year, which is what we have to work with at this time. But in doing so, you're also comparing two different groups of students, because the students who took the test last year are not the students that are taking that same test this year. Do we have scheduled a report that is going to compare the beginning of the year data from this year and the middle of the year data from this year from that same group of students, so that we can see whether or not that growth is actually happening with the initiatives that are being put in place?
Yes, we do. I believe I don't have the calendar in front of me, but I believe that's scheduled in February.
Okay. And so when do the students take the middle of the year test?
They take that when we come back from the winter break, and so that's why I'm saying February, because they have about a 3-week window starting when we return, and it ends in January, so that would give us time to summarize the data and bring it to the board.
Okay.
And Trustee Dara, I'll also add that Mr. Moore and I have been in conversation already as we talk about modeling a data-driven culture and really doing the analysis on the front end of who were kids that ended in a particular space at the end of last year and where are they at the beginning of this year, right? Did we have learning loss over the summer? Really, looking at multiple data points as we triangulate who we're talking about, so that we're addressing different factors, different groups, as kids may have grown over the summer, some kids may have regressed. So it is more about digging into the data and making that data actionable for our principals, and really helping our principals to see the various ways in which they can use that to inform instructional decisions on their campus.
Okay, thank you. So we're giving the MAP testing in English and in Spanish, correct? And I know that there's a huge emphasis through the reading academies on bilingual literacy programs and capitalizing on the students' L1, their native language, so that they can then learn an L2, which would be English in this situation. Do we have any data on how the results we're getting from the students who are taking the Spanish MAP test, how is that translating into STAR data? Because the STAR is not given in Spanish. It is only given in English.
It's
Or do we
actually
have that
both.
data yet?
And STAR is actually given in English and Spanish
Oh, is
through
it?
5th grade.
Okay.
Not on after that. So 6th grade on, it's English only. But right now, at least, it's given in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. You can either take it in English or Spanish.
Okay. And through what grades are teachers participating in the reading academies? Is that pre-K through 2nd or K through 2nd?
It's K-3.
K through 3.
The state is expanding to pre-K, hopefully next year. And then the state has also announced that it will expand to grades 4 and 5 in the coming years.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because we're still teaching reading in grades 4 and 5.
That's correct.
What are we, Fort Worth ISD, providing for teachers beyond 3rd grade to help with their professional development so that they are implementing strategies with fidelity and that are proven to be effective?
So I'll address that in a couple of ways. Many of our teachers are going through NIHOuse training and Lexia training, as well as training on the implementation of the curriculum. Our professional development menu has gotten quite skinny, and that's intentional because we know that our K-5 space and even into our 6-8 space, helping our kids navigate foundational literacy skills is still present in some of our upper grades. And so there is professional development around disciplinary literacy and ensuring that kids are deeply engaged in content literacy as well as content knowledge. So how do we support literacy, engagement, and enrichment in all subject areas, as well as providing our 4 and 5 teachers with foundational supports as well as they implement in their classroom.
And back to, Mr. Risby, your comment with the STAR being in English and in Spanish, how does that translate into our overall data as a district?
We get a different result for English and for Spanish. We have roughly 2/3 test in English and 1/3 in Spanish, which is pretty consistent with our numbers that you saw tonight. When we report that on the Goal 1 at least, we combine those. So we combine the results in English with the results in Spanish, as well as the results from our STAR Alt 2, which is for our low incidence population.
Mm-hmm.
So we combine that so that we're capturing every 3rd grader that we serve in the district. I'm happy to bring back to you, I won't say it from my head because I might tell you the wrong number.
I wouldn't expect you to.
But I'm happy to bring back to you those results in English and Spanish disaggregated.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. And that's all, President Jackson.
Thank you. Trustee Evans.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for this very thorough report. Trustee Ramos kind of touched on it when he asked if, our GPMs are predictive of the goals. So does this fall's map data indicate we're going to be on track for Goal 1? And I know, and maybe that's not a fair question if it is like an apples to orange comparison because it's a map test versus a STAR test, but surely they correlate, right? So that's my first question. What does this fall's map data tell us?
Yes, so, Sarah can help me here. As we have had extensive conversations with NWA around the overlay of STAR to map. And map to STAR and the correlation. And again, I don't want to throw out a percentage of accuracy, but there is a deep and in-depth study, psychometricians and people who are much, more degreed than I am. But the correlation between map and STAR is very tightly aligned, and we've found it to be predictive. So I think as we look at map scores in the past, historically, it is quite predictive of how we do on STAR.
And I concur, that's exactly right. One thing we want to say, though, is it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. And one of the reasons that I think the map, to your question, and also to Mr. Ramos's point earlier, are these aligned? Our map is one of the most aligned things we have, but what we get at the beginning of the year, projecting to an end-of-the-year score, gives us where we will be if we don't step up our game.
do
And so
nothing
that
else.
is that's a call to action for us when we see a projection of 26% for English testers at the beginning of the year, that's not acceptable, and we know that we have to move. And the data then from slide 23, which we will have a beginning of year to middle of the year when we do that February presentation, will tell us, did we grow more than expected? And continuing to grow more than expected will accelerate our learning for our kids. So that is what we want to watch, and it's a good question that you all are asking. We have that both for all students and then for each student group as well.
Thank you. So as we, go back and look at goals and continuing to cast the vision for the district, right now our goal is 47% at 2024, but looking at, I think it's page 7 and 9, does that map data tell us that those pre-K kindergartners in 3-4 years, we're going to be closer to 60% rather than 43% or 47%? So, and can we recalibrate our goals, based on this predictive data?
You want to speak to that?
So we had a lot of conversation about that, knowing that, the board is going to have these conversations ongoing. And so what I would say is that in our hearts and minds, you ask for real conversation. So what I would say is we're in a really deep learning phase right now as a district. And I want to be transparent about that. We have to let go of some practices that and adopt some new ones that are more evidence-based. And again, I quote Tim Shanahan on this: there are practices that work and there are practices that work better. And so we're in a phase right now where we are learning about practices that work better and better for all. And so I think that looking at increasing goals soon is appropriate. And I think we have to acknowledge where we are as a district in terms of adopting and implementing and internalizing new practices that work for all of our students in all of our campuses each and every day.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Lastly, looking at the instructional priorities that we reviewed on page 27, throughout this presentation, you've kind of mentioned a cultural shift in the way we're looking at the data and our instruction. I've had several principals and even parents comment about that sixth element of engagement, that the parents are now feeling engaged. And I am thankful for this cultural shift for us as a district, that we now, are empowering these parents as first teachers and acknowledging the power of their partnership. So I'm happy to see that listed as a priority.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Trustee Luebanos.
Thank you, President Jackson. On page 9, Trustee Ramos reference to, and you mentioned that the curriculum has changed for K to second grade. What about third grade? Is that the same curriculum or is that different too?
So we did curricular revisions all summer to work on, how do I say this, to help our teachers accelerate and not remediate. So part of the acceleration process is really deciding what are the essential skills and knowledge, and by that I don't mean TEKS, although it is TEKS aligned. But if we're going to accelerate, we've got to decide what are the must-dos within a particular grade. And so we looked at it from a teaching and learning lens to say that depth is better than breadth. So how do we focus on what are the essential skills that kids must get in third grade if, say, for example, they didn't really engage in second grade in the way we wanted them to. So how do we scaffold up? How do we ensure that they get those third grade skills? And so there were curriculum revisions in all of our grades to help our teachers with the acceleration concept. rather than the remediation concept. But the K-2 space really needed to be revised in terms of rigor and complexity, as well as leaning into our biliteracy model to make sure that we were strengthening native language, language one, and also ensuring that our kids are exposed to English skills, knowing that testing in both languages ends in 5th grade.
Thank you. Then on page 11, the students who attend pre-K score higher than the others who didn't attend pre-K. Were those new students, or were those students who decided not to attend pre-K? Do we know?
What we really base that on, Trustee Luevanos, is just our enrollment records for whether a student was in the Fort Worth pre-K or was not. The schools try sometimes to collect information from the parents about the pre-K experience, but if they're not in our pre-K, the other experiences are pretty broad and we can't necessarily group them. So this is really just saying they attended with us or they did not, and then looking at their performance.
Thank you. Then on page 19, the projected, I see an increase for Hispanic students, English learners, and then special ed. Those are the only three that instead of the projecting to be positive, moving in the right direction, I see a decline.
So I think what I'll speak to there is exactly what Ms. Rispy had said previously, is that this projection is, if we were to look at it right now today, and so the conversations that we had as we dug into the data and started to disaggregate it is so feeling hopeful, and hope is not a strategy, but feeling hopeful that we have over almost a year's worth of instruction in front of us. And so how do we help our principals and how do we help our teachers really get more granular and informed about the data so we know who needs to move forward, who needs some scaffolds, who needs some support, which campuses are implementing our materials and our resources and our programs with fidelity, right? Again, leaning on the partnership with Mr. Moore to ensure that the plan is enacted every single day. And knowing that we have months in front of us of instruction. But the call to action is there, the sense of urgency is there, and we are also tracking and monitoring who's using resources and who's implementing, and we are in partnership to remedy that.
Thank you. And then I'm happy to hear that the biliteracy model that we've been talking about, it is finally coming to been implemented. We've been talking about it for so long. And I'm happy to see that happening. So thank you.
Trustee Quentin Phillips.
Thank you, President Jackson. Thank you all for this presentation. I'm not naive to where we are, right? As far, particularly with everything that we've been dealing with societally, and I can't say that the numbers are shocking to me or anything. I do believe in the plan. I have been thoroughly impressed by our plan. I believe the implementation now is occurring, and so we hopefully we really do see the results that we're looking for from the plan. So I guess really mine is more just to not only just to necessarily the three presenting or to the superintendent themselves, but even to us as a board and as a collective adult community governing over the student body, that we're trying to help realize their full potential. So when I look at page number 3, we're looking at third grade students who score at meets grade level or above on the STAR reading, and I know that we're trying to get that trajectory from that 34 to 47. Those first numbers, 2016 through 2021, kind of, telling the story of where we've been and kind of what's been happening and where we currently are. And I know that the 2021 through 24 are those trajectory numbers and where we are going to be hitting. Even with that, what I'm seeing is that African American students are scoring lower than special education students. And not only is that just a story that's been told with accuracy, but it's also our goal and projection that that's going to continue. I think it behooves us, all of us, to not allow that to be our goal or not allow the trajectory to be sustainable or acceptable, right? For the special education students, I want the ambitious goal. That's good that we can look in that light. And with special education students, there's a learning disability or actual physical or mental disability present to where we understand those hurdles if they don't come to fruition or how hard we have to fight for that to occur. But we should all be very appalled if we're saying that this separate number of African American students, although there are African American students in that special ed category as well, we're saying this separate number over here of the African American students who do not have mental disabilities or learning disabilities or physical impairments that keep them from learning. And yet the expectation that we're setting or are willing to accept seems to be that you are able to stay below those who actually have those disabilities. I don't think we are able to do that in good conscience. I know I am not able to do that in good conscience. I just want that to be on the forefront of the table, not only for those doing the implementation, but all of us also doing the accountability measures that shouldn't fly in our presence. If we are able to say that these African American students are in fact every bit as good as any of the other counterparts they have, then they should be able to perform at the level of their counterparts. And if they're not, that means there's something we're doing to make that not be the case. Mr. Moore.
Trustee Phillips, I appreciate that. I'll draw your attention back to the conversation we had around campus culture,
Sure.
And specifically student and staff culture. To me, that's what you're speaking to, and that's why we've been intentional this year as we started our partnership and we've looked at the work that we're doing with our principals to start with the expectations and the culture on our campus so that we will not accept that any student group,
Sure.
especially our student groups in greatest need, our black and brown students, are not achieving at the levels. And it starts with the mindset, it starts with the commitment, and that's from everyone's part, from every member of the campus. So I appreciate your comment and just wanted to draw your attention that we are being purposeful about starting in the right place, and that's establishing the expectation in our culture on our buildings.
And the other thing that I would add to that, and thank you, Mr. Moore, because that's exactly where I was going to go, is to really point to this slide and say that we've named that in terms of staff culture, student culture, how students feel belongingness on a campus. If I take you to the instructional framework, the very front part of the instructional framework is about creating classroom environments that are equitable and welcoming and warm and inviting for all students. And so, I'm more than happy again to bring the instructional framework out and share with you, but the front portion of it was developed in conjunction with multiple departments to ensure that all students feel represented and welcome in the classroom and that they're linguistically supportive as well as culturally responsive. And so that is a part of our work as we improve instruction. The culture in the classroom also has to be addressed.
I wanted to add too, Trustee Phillips, that I believe our campuses have called out race and that lowest performing group, which often is our African American group, in their campus improvement plans. So in addition to setting a goal for all students, which is required, they have also looked at their data by campus, and each campus has chosen their lowest performing student group in whatever subject and set a goal for that group as well, so that their expectation may be that they are accelerating those lower groups. In the board goals currently, each group, whatever the all students group was, if it was to go up 3 points, each group was going up 3 points. That certainly doesn't have to stay that way, but that's the way that those were originally set up. But campuses have realized exactly what you're talking about and set that in their campus improvement plans.
That's fantastic. And that is equity in its very definition. And that is the ask. And so even to my colleagues, I ask that we keep that at the forefront of our mind as we go into building new goals, that we have an expectation that is raised for our students, because if we raise that expectation, they will rise and meet it. We just have to be adult enough to give them what they need to do so. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Trustee Phillips. And you can take that I statement to a we statement, and I bet it goes all the way around this table. But thank you. I have just a few questions. You mentioned that you're watching 3 pyramids. And when you're watching, are you looking at student mobility and consistency of teachers on those campuses? And are you controlling for that?
So I would say that we are looking at multiple factors, mobility being one of them, stability of teachers being the other. But we're also looking at fidelity of implementation of the program as it is designed. We're looking at teacher professional learning, principal professional learning, campus instructional coach professional learning as they make a shift to this new curriculum. And we're a part of the TEA pilot. So, I mean, we're looking at multiple factors to make sure that we're taking into account and triangulating multiple data sources so that we can support in the very best way possible, as well as intervene with other supports where spaces are struggling, say, with letting other practices go.
And President Jackson, if I can add to that, I appreciate you calling out the three pyramids that we're looking at our instructional materials pilot with, and we are being intentional more than just the instructional practice. But what I would say is calling out additional factors that contribute to student success is happening on all of our pyramids. I'll bring us back to the pyramid realignment work that this board approved and that we're implementing now. You'll see that all of our executive directors are here. The fact that our executive directors are focused on single pyramids to really look at all of the factors, not just education, but looking at our leadership priorities and how we implement those consistently across our across our pyramids will continue to be a focus for all of our work in all pyramids.
Thank you both. Also, with regard to goals, we all have an expectation of immediacy of lifting goals. But we also know that things can go like this and they need to plateau if they're to be sustained. How are you controlling for plateaus? How are you helping teachers understand and students understand and parents understand when there are plateaus in student academic achievement?
So I'll go first and then I'll throw it over to Mr. Moore. I think it is what we have here with is priority number 1. Really understanding a data-informed culture and what that looks like and how we engage in professional learning around how we look at data, how it informs our practice, how it shapes what we do with particular student groups. You can have a high-achieving student group, but low growth. Those students need something different, right? And so how are we using the data to really inform our instructional decisions? And we're modeling that, I think, ourselves as we dig into data more as a leadership team and with our principals, and they then go back and model that practice on the campus and how we support with the EDs from leadership and the EDs from teaching and learning and other departments, obviously. But and how do we support them through that process? Data can be overwhelming if we don't focus on the right data. So I think it's helping them narrow the focus and say, here's the data sets that we really want to look at, and then help folks take action according to that data.
And the only thing, if I can add to that, is that data-informed culture is not just about instructional or educational data. That's embracing a culture that says every decision that we make about the direction our campus is trending, the work that we need to do with our students is grounded in data. You reference mobility. We talk about behavior. We talk about attendance. We talk about grades. We talk about external factors that impact the ability for our students to learn. And so how do our leaders use that data to guide their steps, keeping students at the forefront of all decisions that we make?
Thank you. And the last thing is you utilized a phrase that you've used before, double down. Can you just define for the board what doubling down means? I like it because I know what it means in some cases.
Well, it depends on the day, Trustee Jackson. But what I would say is just getting very clear on what it is that we believe works when it comes to literacy instruction, and supporting our educators and supporting our principals to make sure that we're using evidence-based practices every day, that we are accelerating, not remediating every single day, that we are using our instructional minutes wisely, productively every single day. So it's the elements of the plan and getting real serious about what that looks like every single day in student instruction. And again, this is where the partnership is actually, it's incredible, is that we're all implementers, right? We are all accountable for making sure that it's working. And so it is not solely on the ED of leadership to make sure that instructional practices are shifted, but rather Dr. Carruthers and the literacy team and, Mr. Nigella and the social studies team. And so there is this synergy and this partnership happening between our two divisions, that it is not just on the executive directors of leadership to make sure that these instructional shifts are happening, but rather it's on all of us.
Thank you. And if there are no other questions, I want to thank you all for a very thorough presentation, and thank you for entertaining all of our questions, because they were very comprehensive tonight. Thank you. We are up to consent agenda items, and we will discuss them at this time. As Board President, I'm making the following statement in accordance with Board Policy BBFA Local. This is a reminder to all board members of the legal conflict of interest requirements and disclosure requirements you may have for matters under consideration on the agenda for this meeting. If required by law, board members shall recuse themselves from all discussion and shall abstain from voting on any matter pertaining to such a disclosure. Are there any questions concerning consent agenda items? Trustee Evans.
Thank you. I believe it's BN. Under the cost for this, it said to be negotiated. So could I ask for an explanation as to the fee structure? Like, what's a typical rate or range of rates for a contract of this nature? And is it based on time billed or the amount sold, contingency? What's it based on?
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans. Mr. Ball, our CFO, can address that.
Thank you, Trustee Evans. I'm happy to address that. The fee schedule that exists in the current contract is based on a per bond sold structure. In other words, the financial advisors don't receive any compensation except when bonds are sold, and there is a decreasing per bond rate that recognizes the fact that regardless of the dollar amount of a bond sale, there's a certain amount of sort of fixed cost in preparing all the documents, doing all the analysis, and all of the professional expertise that they bring to the table. And then as the dollar amount increases, it's not necessarily a linear relationship to an increase in work, so the per bond amount decreases. And this fee schedule has been in place since 2018. We would expect it to be something similar to that, if not the same, as if the board should give the superintendent or his designee the authority to negotiate such a contract. This is the fairly standard practice in the financial arena, and so that's how it works. And so, the reason that we didn't specify that in the item is that the procurement method that we're required to use for professional services requires that we make the selection based on qualifications, and then we negotiate the fee. That way, I think the legislature recognizes that, for example, you don't want to have brain surgery by the low bidding surgeon, and so you don't want to do that in financial matters either. You want to select the professional based on the qualifications and then talk about fee. And so it may look like we're sort of dodging the issue, but it's really because that's the way the statute requires that this kind of procurement be conducted.
And if I may, Ms. Evans, so what we're saying here is identifying a firm based on qualifications. If we are unable to negotiate a fee that we are comfortable with, then this would come back to the board with a.
Absolutely, yes.
For a different recommendation.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Scribner.
for that explanation. You mentioned it's not a linear thing, the rate is not linear. Is it like a sliding scale? And if
It's
so-
decreasing. It
Decreasing,
decreases
okay.
as the amount of the bond, as the dollar amount increases, the per bond rate decreases, recognizing that a lot of that work is done
On the front end?
regardless of what the amount of the issue is.
Okay. What is the rate for, let's say, $1 billion worth of bonds sold? Under our current contract, I know this is just
Well,
the
there's a
resolution.
maximum on each bond sale, but it starts out at $1 per $1,000, and that's typically the denomination that bonds are issued in. So it's $1 per bond, and you would never issue. I say never. That's a long time, but typically the district would not issue. I mean, the largest sale that we've had recently was $250 million, and that was a large transaction. And so this sliding scale would start at $1 for the first $35 million. It's 98 cents for the next $70 million, 90 cents for the next $100 million, 85 cents for the next $350 million. So right there, we're beyond probably what the district would ever issue. And so they do all of the analysis year-round as the district has a need for it, but they only get paid as we have bond sales.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Michael Ryan.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to remove item N from the consent agenda.
Do you have a specific rationale for the removal, sir?
Just for information for us, so we can get further information. I wouldn't even care if it was tabled until the November board meeting, because we've got the election coming up before then, and there might not be a need in it.
So do you want to pull it or table it?
I'd rather table it till the November meeting.
Okay. Trustee Dar.
Due to my employment with ESC Region 11 and any potential conflict of interest that might be created by that employment, I recuse myself from any discussion or consideration of agenda item L.
Okay.
And I concur. This is a significant decision regarding N, and I would like to table this as well for some additional information. I just don't feel like I have enough information to work with in order to fully support this.
Okay, Trustee Luebanos.
Thank you, President Jackson. In the past, we used two companies to do the financial advisors, RBC and then Estrada and Hinojosa. And I believe I only saw one company this time. In a bond this big, 1.5, if we can get the top three companies, I don't know. Since last time we had two companies for $750 million, I would like to see more than one person looking at the advising on such a large amount of money.
That's a great point, Trustee Luebanos. There certainly would be no harm in having multiple firms. I think our experience with multiple firms, and all the firms are great firms, so hear that if you don't hear anything else, but it has been somewhat difficult to really determine who's the lead advisor and who's the review advisor, if you will. And so I think if it's the pleasure of the board to have more than one firm, I think it would be important moving forward to establish somebody's the first chair and somebody else is second chair or third chair, however many the board would like to have. I think one of the things that is important to note is the underwriting team, which is a totally separate issue from this, is that's where you've got to have multiple players at the table, particularly of the dollar value that Fort Worth ISD is dealing with. Does it hurt to have another set of eyes looking at the advisory work? Certainly it doesn't. But my thinking would be it's much more important to have multiple players involved in the underwriting team, because those are the people that are actually bringing the buyers to the table, marketing the bonds, creating a competitive environment to get the best rates for the district. The financial advisory firm really, although the timing of this would give the appearance that it's associated with a particular, be it the 2017 bond or the 2021 bond, I would submit that the district needs a qualified financial advisor, whether or not there's a bond program going on, because it's a needed advisory role to help the district plan for its long-term capital expenditure needs, whether or not there's a bond program on the table. And many districts have, it's sort of a relationship type relationship, I guess, because you've got to have that ongoing expertise available, whether there's a bond program or not going on. That's Mike's take on it anyway. And would be my recommendation that the board have a financial advisor regardless of the outcome next Tuesday.
Trustee Ramos.
Sorry. I'm going back to February of this year, pre the election, and how we again end up replaying where we were in February, and here we are again. I mean, I'm not one that I'm going to sit silent on this topic. And, you know, we've been talking about governance a great deal. And here we go again. And we're zeroing in, and we're even making possible, it's comments / questions that are leaning towards kind of leading scenarios of, we have a financial expert in front of us, and we are going to use a tactic of tabling, or we're going to use a tactic of, you know, things that have been done before. And I gave the history in February, and I'm willing to give it again. The history was that we had an all-white firm that was doing this work, and there was no questions asked. There was a racial equity policy committee. There was a racial equity folks who said, we need to be able to diversify in the way that we do business. And at that time, they decided to go with a firm who was people of color. And then the leadership at that time said, we don't know that we can trust this firm enough, so let's bring in a white firm, an international bank. That's how we ended up with two. But let's be clear. There's been some folks that have been coming and courting and visiting with these board members, some of our colleagues. We have social media pictures. There's been plenty of interaction of someone who's been having conversations with this board. And here we are again. We had time to review this. We had agenda review. You could have asked questions. You could, I'm being real. I can't sit on this no more. This is the reason I brought it up for constraints. It's recorded. It's on video. I knew these things were going to be happening. When a bond is coming, when monies are going to be coming through the district, all of a sudden, there's questions about these kinds of topics. We just did the work. We did great work on student outcomes conversations. And now we're going to zero in on this topic? Come on, y'all. I got to put it on record. And if this is a tactic, I get you grinning, Dr. Ryan, but that's not cool, man. We talked about this. We've been addressing this. This is the reason why I'm pushing us to be in a governance training, so that we can understand and be clear in our role. But we talk about there's politics. This is right here by definition, put it on record. This is politics. That's my I statement. I believe it. And when we go to putting this on voting on it separately, I'm willing to go on it a little bit more, and we can connect some dots. And we can have some conversations, because this is ridiculous. This is not our role. We are not financial experts. We can ask questions, but you had a window. You had a time frame to do that. And that we're here right now, these are the reasons why we waste time on student outcome minutes, because we're focusing on things that have nothing to do with that.
Thank you, President. Thank you, former President Ramos. You know, this evening, our questions have confirmed that we're a board working to hold this administrative team accountable and fiscally responsible, and this administrative team works hard to deliver accountability during the most challenging times in education in decades. In 2017, Fort Worth ISD successfully launched, delivered, and nearly completed a much-needed $748 million bond we heard about tonight. It was the largest in the district's history, which utilized 2 financial service companies. I was board president at that time. 2 trustees came to me and said we need to diversify this, and I agreed, and I still agree. Today's agenda is asking the board to abandon a system of great utility specifically developed during the 2017 bond. And I did ask these questions before this meeting. They weren't answered. A system predicated upon a completely different staff approval process. The result, we're now eliminating 50% of the financial advisory service companies employed by the district at no net cost savings, but at one considerable risk, and that is of diminished oversight. In the 2017 bond selection of 2 financial advisory service companies, Fort Worth ISD utilized a protocol, a multidisciplinary selection, so multiple departments and individuals from departments helped with the selection. This time it was one department. Face-to-face interviews, personal interaction with the teams. There weren't any this time. What was the rationale, Mr. Ball, for changing the protocol, the selection protocol?
Ms. Jackson, I can't answer that necessarily. Obviously, I wasn't here in 2018 when the process you just described took place. I think we followed the process that we currently follow on in our procurement process. We select a committee to review the respondents to a request for proposals, or in this case, a request for qualifications. We typically base that on people that are knowledgeable about the matter that we're trying to procure, whether that be instructional supplies or consulting of some nature. We want people to be involved in the evaluation who have some level of knowledge about the subject matter, and it was our feeling that that there really isn't an interdisciplinary approach to an analyzing financial transactions of this type that are highly specialized. And so certainly if the board's pleasure is that we have another process and expand the the committee that's involved with the evaluation of it, we can certainly do that. Obviously all of this, we serve at the pleasure of the board, and so if the process we utilize doesn't meet to the satisfaction of the board, we can certainly do it again, and happy to do that.
It's not whether it meets the satisfaction or not. I just wanted to know if there was a rationale for changing it. This is the largest bond, again, that this district has ever presented to the taxpayers. I want to make sure that we're making the right decision. We have 3 jobs: policy, holding the superintendent accountable, and fiscal responsibility. And this is the largest expenditure this district will make. It's twofold that of our annual budget, or almost twofold that. This administrative team had concerns in 17 that a district of our size with a bond of $748 million should have 2 financial advisors. I distinctly remember that. And when I looked around, TCC, the City of Fort Worth, Austin ISD, Houston, and Dallas all have 2 sets of financial advisors. It doesn't cost us any more money, but we get 2 sets of eyes. I don't have a dog in the fight.
Yeah, you do.
But I'll tell you what I do have.
I'm ready to sound off.
Let's go.
So, yeah, you do have a dog in the fight, because you've been walking around with a Poly alumni photos pushing this person and this firm. You do have a dog in the fight. And if this is the point where I draw the line and I'm no longer going to play ball with this board, this is it then. I've never seen a president come with a statement ready for a consent agenda item. So I'm going to absolutely call you out on that. I think that's completely inappropriate. Wrong of you, and then to try to mislead and use language to say that you don't have a dog in the fight. You absolutely do. So we put this up for a vote. I'm ready. Let's go. I mean, let's put this all out. I'm there. This is, I tried to have faith in this board. Try to have faith in this process. Getting slammed every which way about where the monies are coming from and who's doing what. Like, President Jackson, I know the details to that. And this, and you all come with this shenanigan today. No, it's not okay. We've been having these conversations. We have leaned into governance. I encourage the public to watch the videos. The reason why we want the constraints, and everybody wants to kind of lallygag around the constraints, this is the reason why I want rigid constraints on the board. There's a history here. It's who feeds our elections. It's who gets people elected. It's who puts money into the bond. It's who gets the contracts to the bond. I'm trying to play with the board, but we get to this point and we're micromanaging. These are the behaviors that don't allow us to focus on student outcomes. We have our experts. We have our educational expert. We have our financial expert, and we as the board are going to push back on that. And we haven't pushed back on any of the other items. And we show up today, and this is one we're going to pull, and it's a repeat of what happened in February. In February, it was going into the May election. There's no connections there. There's absolutely connections to this. So I'm just going to say I push back on you. I completely disagree with you. Do not like how this is going at all.
I'm not particularly thrilled with how it's going either, but I appreciate the dialogue. I have no concern over who we hire. The concern I have is how many financial advisors we have, and I've had calls about this from multiple people.
You're negating the point that we had one firm prior to all of this. We had one.
And we changed the protocol.
And we changed because Mrs. Moss, Norm Robbins, Ashley Paz, and us were pushing for the racial equity policy to diversify how we do business. Who could have gotten the contract was supposed to be a firm of people of color, but a white CFO at that time did not think that firm could handle it, pushed on the board and said, we need to do an international bake so that they can have the money and all of that other stuff that they talked about. And what it turns out is that that's not true either. And now all of a sudden we want two, but if we come back with a second recommendation, and it is who I think it is, I'm going to blow this thing up. I'm going to post everything that I've been collecting, watching, trying to trust this board that it wasn't going to go that route. But here we are. So yeah, go ahead. I gave you the history, and you were there, and you know how it went.
I was there because I'm the one that said yes
to
you, and
reference
I fought
that it was an
for
all-white firm who had it before, and nobody asked any questions for over a decade. For over a decade, we had no problem with that.
Actually, I did ask questions, but
you didn't address it and you didn't do anything about it. You always ask questions. I want solutions. That's what we brought. We pushed as a board for solutions.
And I was part of that, Jacinto.
Eventually.
And you know that.
So
I was part of it the
be-
minute you brought it to me, and the minute you wanted to do it, I said yes, and I fought for that to
I want
happen.
you to be a president that adheres to governance and leads this board with integrity.
I'm
That's what I
adhering to
want.
governance. I called the superintendent over the weekend. I asked for options. I'd had multiple calls from people.
You were at agenda review as well.
I was at agenda review. I received calls after agenda review.
Who called you, if I may ask?
Individuals from the community,
From your community or from the west side?
from my community and the west side,
Okay.
both sides. But thank you for asking for clarification, because I wouldn't have thought to say that. Trustee Phillips.
Thank you, President Jackson. So I wasn't here for all that, so I don't know about all the other stuff. I mean, y'all are veterans. I'll let y'all go through what all that looks like as far as history. What I will say, though, is that what I will say is, Mr. Ball, what is your title again?
It's Chief Financial Officer, Trustee Phillips.
Chief Financial Officer, okay. And you have a recommendation as to what you think will be best for the financial stability of this district surrounding this particular topic?
Yes, sir. It's the recommendation of the Evaluation Committee, which was our treasurer, our senior officer for finance and budget, and myself. And the purchasing department actually scored or evaluated the hub eligibility. And so it was really a team of 3 out of the finance division, and of course, purchasing is in the finance division as well, so the financial professionals and somebody in purchasing evaluated the historically underutilized business aspect of it.
Okay, appreciate that. And so then, Dr. Scribner, you are the superintendent of the school district.
Yes.
And your chief financial officer has made his recommendation as far as what he feels will be best in the best interest of the finances of the school district. Is that the recommendation that you're bringing forward to the board?
That is the recommendation that we're bringing forward to the board, yes.
Thank you. I heard my colleague Trustee Andar say that she didn't feel she had adequate information in order to be able to make the decision based on that, and I can completely respect that and understand that. So if that is the case, and it is asked that this is supposed to be tabled, which looks like that's the inevitable path that we're going down, how about the CFO, under the supervision of the superintendent, bring forth to us why, in presentation, for all of us to be able to see in all of its glory publicly, why you're making whatever the recommendation is that you're going to make as far as this goes. And then those of us on the board can ask questions at that point, and we can vote on said recommendation. Where I do understand the passion of Trustee Ramos is that we do have a lane that we're supposed to be in. You guys are supposed to be figuring out all that minutia. You're supposed to bring it to us, and we either vote on it or we don't, right? And so we've gotten way far to the weeds outside of our lane, big time, with all of this, in my estimation at this moment. But it happens, and maybe this is our growing edge to where we get back to where we need to get to, so we can be in our lane with integrity and implement with fidelity the things that we say we're going to do. So if we need further information, which I'm with you, I always want to make sure I'm informed on what it is I'm voting on. I would kindly ask CFO Ball, if you would, not at this moment, but maybe if we're going to put it on the next board meeting, whatever, that you have a presentation as far as what do you recommend to the district. Superintendent Scribner, if you would then say that you do recommend that, if you do agree with what your CFO is telling you. And then how about us as board members actually vote on the information that is presented to us, instead of us trying to figure out how we're going to be the ones to determine who's going to be what, because that ain't our job. I rest my time, President
Thank
Jackson.
you, Trustee Phillips. Trustee Dar.
Thank you, President Jackson. When I said I didn't feel like I had enough information, I guess what really jumped out to me is very rarely, if ever, do we see a cost to be negotiated. And so that got my attention because we generally have a dollar amount that we know that we're working with. And so that was, it got my attention. And it would be nice if we are going to do any kind of a presentation to see how what kind of returns have we seen from this financial advising company. I don't question their viability or their ability or your ability to choose somebody. I don't have enough data to work with, and I think this is a really important decision. That I'm not saying that this isn't the decision that should be made, but I think it's important that as a board, the community sees us working with data to make this decision because it is their money that we're responsible for as the decision is made. So it was simply that all of this is just a name and words to me because I wasn't a part of the RFQ process. I don't know if it's possible to look at the qualifications or whatnot. And so it's words on a page without enough information for me to know what to do with the words on that page. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I think I've said it before. I feel like we need to be as data driven as we possibly can.
So, Madam Board President, and members of the board, just a quick reminder, we have an item. This item has been requested to be removed by Trustee Ryan. And after executive session, we do have an item on the agenda where the board can vote on items removed from consent agenda and have discussion if it so chooses to. I know there's been quite a bit already. but the time for voting would be at that item after closed session. Just wanted to do a quick reminder to the board on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Trustee Phillips?
Yes, thank you, President Jackson. So I'm just hoping that, Mr. Ball, that you're able to hear some of the information that we may be seeking out as far as why you're making the decision. But with any of it, I mean, it's simple as if you're choosing someone, you should be able to tell us why you're choosing it, why that's the best route to go, if there's data to be supplied. I think that the answer you gave to Trustee Evans as far as the why of the negotiation, I found that to be satisfactory, but I'm one person, right? So maybe that is just happened to be in presentation form, that this is an estimate of what this usually looks like, even though we might not have the dollar sign narrowed down as of yet. But that seems to be sufficient information, one person speaking again. So if you can just tell us what it is you want.
Absolutely, and I'll let Mr. Ball address that as well. But it is not entirely unusual for an item that's an RFQ, request for qualifications, not RFP, to come and then have the contract be negotiated after the board allows us to.
Sure.
Basically, you're authorizing us to negotiate the contract. If that is unsuccessful and the whatever vendor wants to charge too much, then we don't get into a bad deal, and we would nix that and then come back with another recommendation. Mr. Ball?
That's absolutely correct, Dr. Scribner, and certainly we understand the anxiety about not having a firm dollar amount, and we can certainly provide some estimates, some what-ifs type scenarios. We do have to understand that we can't predict at this point the timing of the various sales over the planning window for the bond election. The amount of each of those sales then would determine the amount of these fees. What we do know, though, is at least we believe that the district does need a financial advisory firm, regardless of whether it has a bond program going on. And we certainly are happy to put together a presentation and give each of the trustees a little more comfort about the why behind the recommendation. We're certainly happy to do that.
Indeed. Well, you all have been hired to be the experts. Give us your expert opinion. We will vote upon your said expert opinion. Thank y'all very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Trustee Phillips. And I'll just say once again, I asked these questions of the superintendent. I did not get answers. TCC, the City of Fort Worth, Dallas ISD, Houston, and Austin all have two companies. If you come back and tell us we only need one and give us the rationale for that, I am perfectly fine with that. I tried to get that information before this meeting, and I did not get the answers that I needed. So that is where I stand right now on this, and I am fine if you come back with a recommendation that says one. But I'd like to know what sets us apart from those other districts, especially when we are passing next Tuesday the largest bond in the history of this district. So that's my concern. And I thank you very much for taking these questions, and I thank the board.
And if I may, I'd like to continue our conversation offline. President Jackson.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Any other questions on consent agenda? The time is 8:22 p.m. The date's Tuesday, October 26, 2021. We will now recess and reconvene for executive session as authorized by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code under Chapters 551, 071, 2, 4, and 6. In accordance with the open meetings law, the board opened the meeting at 5:31 PM with a quorum present, recessed and reconvened open session, adjourned regular session, convened executive session, adjourned executive session, and now has reconvened open session at 9:08 PM with a quorum present, but many people gone, so it's a little bit cold in here. We're at 14, accepting consent agenda items. Trustee Dar, you are abstaining from letter L. And we are, per Dr. Ryan's request, removing N and moving it to action items. Do I have a motion for consent agenda?
Are we tabling it?
They have to vote to table. Yes, sir, but thank you. More heads involved is always better. Do I have a motion for consent? So moved by Dr. Ryan. Do I have a second? Second by Trustee Dar.
Can I second if I'm abstaining?
Yes, because you're only abstaining from one part. Yes, but thank you for asking for clarification. Is that correct? Okay, make sure. All right, so we have motion by Trustee Ryan, second by Trustee Dar. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, let's move to voting as soon as our computers catch up. We're missing one. And the motion passes unanimously with 8 votes. 15A, items removed from consent agenda. We have one. It was item N. Dr. Ryan, would you like to make the motion for item N?
So I'd like to table this motion wait for presentation from district administration and make sure that it's on the November agenda.
Okay, thank you. And that is N, approved qualifications of financial advisory service firms and grant authorization to negotiate and execute a contract. I will second your motion. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting. And we have 7 yeses and 1 no. Moving on to personnel appointments. Executive Director of External and Emergency Communications, and 2 other positions. Dr. Scribner?
Do we vote on
Yeah.
it first? Or what do we typically do?
Oh, yeah, what do we vote on them first. So do I have a motion? Moved by Dr. Ryan, second. Seconded by Trustee Martinez. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously. At this time, Dr. Scribner, would you like to make some introductions?
Thank you very much, President Jackson. At this time, I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Molinar, who will introduce our Executive Director for External and Emergency Communications, as well as our Executive Director of Health Services and District Wellbeing, as per the board's motion and passage of that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner. We're very excited to welcome Claudia Garibay with us. She will be serving as Executive Director for External and Emergency Communications, and I believe she is here. She was here earlier, and she has gone home because she's an early riser, because she is about dealing with emergencies and crisis, and we know those happen during the evening and early in the morning.
And we're going to get some weather tonight.
Yes, we are.
there's a
She is
thunderstorm.
going to prep for us. So we're very, very excited to have her. We do want to share with our stakeholders, she is bilingual, fluent in Spanish, and just excited to have her on board. And you'll be seeing her a lot here at our meetings as well. I just want to verify before I introduce the next one that the vote was for both personnel, because I only see one on there. Was it for both? Yes. Okay, great. All right. Our next personnel is our Executive Director of Health Services and District Wellbeing, and Dr. Justin Gaddis. He is here with us this evening. Dr. Gaddis, you want to stand up and wave? So we're excited to have Dr. Gaddis join us. He's already been part of our Fort Worth ISD family. He will be bringing his expertise to really strengthen our health service department, as well as just working with our families and our students in their entire well-being. So welcome to your new role with us.
Thank you, Ms. Molinar. Action items 16A through D are not necessary this evening, so we will move straight to 17, comments by board members or our superintendent on current district activities and announcements. Trustee Evans?
Thank you. Earlier, we recognized our principals, and I just wanted to take a moment to say how extremely thankful I am for all our principals. The principals are the heartbeat of each campus, and we just acknowledge how much they do for us and our students. So thank you to all our amazing administrators.
Thank you, Trustee Evans. Trustee Dar?
Thank you, President Jackson. I would like to recognize and honor 2 staff members in District 6 schools who recently passed away, to recognize their contribution in our community and to honor the significant impact that they had on students. The first one is Claudia Viega. She was the librarian at West Creek Elementary School. She was a valued employee of Fort Worth ISD, where she served as a teacher, assistant principal, and a librarian. The schools that Claudia served were Sagamore Hill Elementary, Diamond Hill Elementary, Luella Merritt Elementary, and West Creek Elementary. And Claudia was also a dedicated member of Unidad Christiana Saginaw Church. She was a mother, she was a wife, and she was a valued member of the West Creek faculty. It's also with great sadness that I recognize the death of Richard Zarza, who was the robotics teacher at Southwest High School. He had been with the district for 7 years, and he transformed that robotics program into they won the state championship last year, and they placed 7th in the nation in the VEX Robotic Championship, and that's pretty awesome. He was a husband, he was a grandfather, he was a father. And from Lieutenant Colonel retired George W. Vincent, who works at Southwest High School as well, he says, as strong as he was in the engineering and technical aspects of robotics, probably more important was his belief in his students, their ability to accomplish great things. Richard facilitates students' learning by providing them with a robotics room unlike any other in a high school setting I've ever seen, and by feeding them on a vision of excellence, of expecting great things, of placing no limits on what they could achieve. So we thank these 2 remarkable educators for their service, and we also honor their lives and are grateful for all of the lives that they touched while they worked in Fort Worth ISD. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dar. Dr. Ryan? No? On that, I would like to adjourn the meeting in honor of Claudia Viega, librarian from West Creek, Richard Zarza from Southwest High School, and Tanglewood's Alex Williams, Jr., who we recognize tonight.